Chapter 26-20 Crazed Azure Chamber of Commerce's residence, meeting room. Normally it was very difficult to find Azure's Grand Elders gathered in a single location, yet nearly every one of them had convened in the top-floor meeting room, and they all looked impatient. Xianglong, why did you call us here so urgently? You know how busy we are right now. All of the various superpowers are frantically searching for ways to unlock their experts' mana bodies. If we fall behind now, we'll suffer later, a woman in exquisite white mage robes complained. That's right. If this isn't something important, you'll have to pay for our losses, a robust, middle-aged man with crimson eyes and covered in glowing runes agreed, nodding. Despite such rude questioning, Long Xianglong didn't explode in a fit of rage. He tolerated these two not only because they were Grand Elders in Azure, but because their strength was second only to sinful flames as well. They were even stronger than Long Xianglong, the Long family's most formidable expert. Along with Triumphant Howl, they were Azure's three monsters, and each represented Azure's non-family members. Why isn't Triumphant Howl here yet? Long Xianglong asked, glancing at the empty seat beside the two. You know him. Unless the guild is going to war or is at risk of destruction, he doesn't care about anything besides leveling, the crimson-eyed man said. Forget about him. Why did you call for us here? All right then. With 80% of the guild's Grand Elders present, we should have enough people to make a decision, Long Xianglong said, sighing. While Azure's three monsters were incredibly powerful, they were also free spirits. They hated restrictions and rarely listened to the ruling family's representatives. What exactly has happened, Lunatic Long? You actually used a Grand Elder mobilization order. Has something gone wrong with Violet Sword over Silent Wonder? Duan Hanshan demanded, smirking at Long Xianglong. Duan Hanshan had already learned about Feng taking Silent Wonder to Violet Sword's residence the moment Azure's family competition had ended in hopes of settling the dispute between the Long family and the Super Guild. However, he doubted the issue would be so easily resolved. The Zeus Corporation's reputation was at stake, and if the Long family refused to cooperate, it would set a bad example for the other powers under the corporation's command. Even if Silent Wonder were of little significance to the Zeus Corporation's plans, it wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. Meanwhile, Zero Wing didn't have enough power in the West to convince Violet Sword to budge. If the negotiation didn't go well, Violet Sword might even move against the Long family and Zero Wing directly. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, Old Ice Demon. The matter regarding Wonder has already been dealt with, Long Xianglong shot back. As a matter of fact, I've gathered you all here today to discuss good news. This matter might even affect Azure's future. Something that can actually influence Azure's development? Long Wuxiang left with Zero Wing to visit Violet Sword. Have we secured a partnership with the Super Guild over the ancient secret land? The white-clad woman asked, a hint of anticipation flashing in her eyes. The only thing she could think of that might affect Azure's future was the ability to nurture experts. Based on the information Azure had obtained, Violet Sword had discovered an ancient secret land that included an ancient training ground. If Azure's young experts could use this training ground, they could grow significant. Happy face, you're half correct. Long Xiangong replied, chuckling. Have we not negotiated an alliance with Violet Sword? Duan Hanshan asked, confused. Correct. We're cooperating with Zero Wing, Long Xianglong said, nodding. Black Flame is willing to sell us 40 entry slots into the ancient secret land, but in exchange, Black Flame wants our complete Void Realm legacy. Is Black Flame insane? You're talking about our guild's foundation, yet he wants it for 40 measly slots? Only a fool would agree to such a partnership. Have you really gone mad, Lunatic Long? Duan Hanshan said, sneering. What a joke. Azure's Void Realm legacy was the fruit of several decades of hard labor. They'd be crazy to share it with Zero Wing for a few training slots. This data was enough to help an ordinary power become a superpower in just a few short years. In fact, a large part of the reason most guilds didn't become superpowers was that they lacked effective training methods. However, as long as a guild had enough time, money, and this data, it could easily grow into a superpower. This was why the various super first-rate and super guilds rarely sold their research into the realms of refinement. Xianglong, if you've called us here to tell us this, I think it's time the Long family found a new representative, the crimson-eyed man coldly criticized. Everyone in the room gave Long Xianglong frosty looks. The Azure Chamber of Commerce did not belong to one family. It was the result of the 5 main shareholder families and a large number of non-family Grand Elders' exhausting work. It was unacceptable for any one member to sell the guild's secrets. I know, Long Xianglong said, not surprised by everyone's attitude in the least. He simply smiled back at them and continued, what I'm going to say next is the important part. What could possibly be so important that you felt the need to waste our time? Don't tell me Zero Wing can nurture a group of monsters? The white-clad woman said disdainfully. You've hit the nail right on the head, Belle, Long Xianglong replied, nodding at the white-clad woman named Butterfly Belle. Black Flame has promised that he can help us nurture 3 monsters that can unlock more than 100% of their mana body's potential. He's even promised that he'll help the 3 selected players reach 100% within a day. Cross the 100% threshold? Isn't that what the little girl from Zero Wing accomplished? Duan Hanshan exclaimed. Everyone that had watched the family competition had learned of how frightening Violet Cloud's combat power was. Not even a legendary expert like Sinful Flame had been her match. She was inhuman. Most ordinary powers thought unlocking 100% of the mana body could be accomplished given time, but anyone that had tried knew that the closer they got to 100%, the better their mana body performed. Unlocking 100% of one's mana body should be the maximum. However, Violet Cloud, who had broken past 100%, was definitely an extremely talented genius, and anyone that tried to replicate the feat would only be met with failure. Yet, Zero Wing declared that it could nurture inhuman experts like Violet Cloud? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I heard the girl talk about it before. It seems she's not unique in Zero Wing. She even mentioned stronger members of the guild. Sinful Flame suddenly spoke up. Based on her expression at the time, I doubt she was lying. Zero Wing should have more monsters that have crossed the 100% threshold. Everyone fell silent after listening to Sinful Flame's interruption. These elders and grand elders were already impressed that Zero Wing had nurtured a monster like Violet Cloud, but she had to be an exception. That fact would be, more or less, acceptable, but they had just been told that Zero Wing had more monsters like the girl. How could they possibly believe this? Regardless of how unbelievable it was, however, Sinful Flame was a reliable source. This is why I've gathered you all here. What is everyone's opinion of this? Do we accept the offer or not? Long Xianglong asked after sweeping his gaze across the crowded reception room. Chapter 26-21, 3 slots. Everyone in the meeting room remained silent, a fanatic light flashing in their eyes after listening to Long Xianglong's declaration. If Black Flame is telling the truth and he can help 3 of our experts break past the 100% threshold, I think the matter should be negotiable, the crimson-eyed man said. That kind of strength would be extremely helpful during future promotion quests. If we can introduce a few Tier 4 players before the other superpowers, we'll have a head start when raiding mythic field bosses and forbidden lands that have gone untouched. We might even be able to occupy ancient ruins before anyone else has a chance. I concur. While our core secrets are essential, we'll need stronger combatants than we have now if we wish to further Azure's development. If we have a group of Tier 4 experts early on, the other superpowers won't dare target our key resource spots, Butterfly Belle said, nodding. In God's domain, the strong were revered. A strong individual might not benefit a guild when it came to resources, but they were a powerful deterrent for potential enemies, especially if those players were Tier 4 powerhouses. At this stage of the game, no one would dare think of attacking a guild city if it housed a Tier 4 powerhouse. Numbers wouldn't be nearly enough to bridge the gap between a Tier 3 expert's strength and that of a Tier 4 player. With 3 Tier 4 experts, specifically experts with extraordinary combat power for their level and tier, Azure would have an effective deterrent. Even without Violet Sword, Azure could safeguard its current resource areas. The chamber might even be able to secure more. On the other hand, keeping a tight hold on the guild's Void Realm legacy would only ensure that Azure's foundations remain steady. It wouldn't help the guild grow. Upon hearing the crimson-eyed man's and Butterfly Belle's words, the independent Grand Elders promptly nodded in agreement. One couldn't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Now that their potential gains were clearly greater than their potential losses, they had no reason to refuse Zero Wing's offer. I have no arguments against accepting Black Flame's offer, but how do we choose which 3 members to send? Duan Hanshan asked Long Xianglong. Interested to hear his answer, the Grand Elders turned toward the Long family's representative. Long Xianglong had summoned them here to discuss this topic, and Silent Wonder was a member of Zero Wing. The Long family was in the best position to negotiate this deal. These 3 training slots were incredibly valuable. If these 3 players broke past their mana body's 100% threshold, they'd rise to the apex of God's domain, even if they were merely Void Realm experts. Whatever faction these experts belong to would gain quite a bit more authority within the Azure Chamber of Commerce. In fact, the slots distribution might cause a massive authoritarian shift in the guild. I realize what you're all thinking, Long Xianglong said, chuckling as everyone gave him serious looks. Rest assured, the Long family won't try to claim one of the slots for an unworthy candidate. Black Flame has already informed us that no random player will do. The 3 selected individuals must have incredible potential to make a breakthrough. As usual, the 5 families will have priority in selecting 2 players, and if one of their selections isn't a match for the Independence Reserve member, that player will take their place. What does everyone think? Taking the initiative, Butterfly Bell said, in that case I nominate Boss Flame. We all know his strength and potential. I'm sure everyone can imagine how helpful he'd be to the guild if Boss Flame grows even stronger. As for the younger generation, Solitary Frost is unmatched, and we don't have anyone who can surpass Silk Moon's talent. What are your thoughts? The independent Grand Elders silently nodded their agreement to the suggestion. Normally, such opportunities were reserved for the younger generation, but Sinful Flame was Azure's strongest expert. If he could increase his strength, not only would he become a better deterrent for Azure, but he could also solidify the independent Grand Elders' authority. They didn't mind giving up a training slot for this. Duan Han said nothing to oppose the idea. Rather, he was strongly in favor of the suggestion. Earlier, he had worried that the Long family would unfairly try to claim one of the 3 slots. That would leave Solitary Frost competing for the remaining slot reserved for the 5 families. While the young player had almost no chance of losing, nobody could say for certain that the independent faction of the guild didn't have something hidden up their sleeves. Now that Solitary Frost had been selected for one of the 3 slots, however, he had no issues with the arrangement. I'm afraid Silk Moon won't do. We still haven't been able to reach her, Long Xianglong said, shaking his head. Although Black Flame has given us a 2-day time limit, we should make our decision as soon as possible, just in case. I suggest we give the 3rd slot to Yen Xiaoqian. She's almost as talented as Silk Moon. What does everyone think? Everyone in the room stared at Long Xianglong, astonished. Even Duan Hanshan's jaw almost dropped. These training slots were invaluable, yet Long Xianglong wanted to give all 3 away. Moreover, he had just suggested the Duan family claim one. The Long family and Duan family had a ceaseless feud. Now, however, Long Xianglong had just suggested one of his rival's younger members take the 3rd slot. It was unbelievable. Inwardly, Long Xianglong could only smile bitterly as he watched shock and confusion sweep through the room. He did not wish to give this slot away either, but unfortunately with Silk Moon absent, the Long family's only other suitable candidate would be Long Xianglong himself. Due to his rocky relationship with Zero Wing, however, he definitely couldn't go. His pride wouldn't let him. While he could have suggested they send Burning Owl, trying to convince the other Grand Elders of the boy's potential would be difficult. Azure had quite a few stronger players that were Burning Owl's age after all. Since the Long family was going to lose its slot no matter what, he might as well do the Duan family a favor. In any case, the Long family still had Silent Wonder, and because of her, it would have plenty of chances to benefit off of Zero Wing. Moreover, sending Yen Xiaoqian instead of Burning Owl would allow Azure to fulfill Feng's requirements and make training easier. Her potential had already been acknowledged as only second to Solitary Frost's. Lunatic Long, we have no problems with this arrangement if you don't, Butterfly Bell calmly said. None of the other Grand Elders objected to Long Xianglong's proposal. Yen Xiaoqian was quite talented and only half a step away from the domain realm. She was undoubtedly the best candidate after Silk Moon. That settles it then. I'll contact Black Flame after this, Long Xianglong announced, concluding the meeting. He then turned to Duan Han and continued, Old Ice Demon, please prepare Solitary Frost and Yen Xiaoqian. Once we sign the contract with Zero Wing, send them to the Starlight Fortress. It will be taken care of. Once the contract has been signed, I'll take them there myself, Duan Han said, nodding. Following which, everyone proceeded to discuss who they would send to Violet Sword's ancient secret land. As soon as they reached a conclusion, the Grand Elders were dismissed, leaving to prepare for the raid. An hour after the meeting had ended, Long Wuxiang represented the Azure Chamber of Commerce in signing a cooperative contract with Feng. In no time at all, not only had Feng gained the rights to one of Ocean Tide City's medium shipyards and golden lands, but he had also received a small warehouse in the city as a gift. Meanwhile, in Azure City's teleportation hall. Are we really going to train with Zero Wing, Uncle Han? Yen Xiaoqian asked Duan Han, who wore a serious expression. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to rejoin Violet Sword's training if we do. Instructor Tori might just give up on us. Although she and Solitary Frost were members of the Azure Chamber of Commerce, and where they trained it was none of Violet Sword's business, these two were considered Tori's disciples. Training with Zero Wing would be a slap in the face to Tori, as if they were declaring that Zero Wing's training was more valuable. While Violet Sword's training is amazingly effective, this is a unique opportunity. Do you think securing these slots was easy? I doubt you'll get a chance like this in the future. Moreover, only Zero Wing can provide this kind of training right now, Duan Hanshan informed her coldly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You, Uncle Hanshan, I agree with Xiaoqian. It is only a matter of time before we unlock our mana body's full potential, but opportunities to improve our combat standards and techniques are difficult to come by. We went to great lengths to earn Instructor Tori's guidance. If he finds out that we left to train with Zero Wing, I doubt he'll agree to train us anymore, Solitary Frost said. While he admitted that Zero Wing was quite capable when it came to helping players unlock their mana body's potential, passing up a chance to improve their combat standards and techniques for a chance to unlock their mana bodies a few days sooner was a waste. The only reason he had lost to Silent Wonder, in his opinion, was that he had yet to unlock his mana body fully. If he had, defeating her would have been a piece of cake. With enough time, anyone could unlock their mana body's full potential. Hence, he firmly believed that improving his combat standards and techniques was the true path to power. You're only going to Zero Wing to unlock your mana body. You're not there to learn techniques. It doesn't clash with Instructor Tori's training. I'm sure he won't have an issue with this, Duan Hanshan replied. It's getting late. We should hurry to the Starlight Fortress. We shouldn't make Zero Wing wait too long. With that said, Duan Hanshan led Solitary Frost, Yen Xiaoqian, and a few dozen Azure members through the teleportation array and to the closest NPC town to the Starlight Fortress. Chapter 26-22, Changes to the Starlight Fortress. Star Valley, Starlight Fortress. A long line of players, including tens of thousands, waited to enter the magnificent, ancient fortress. There were also quite a few Tier 3 players among them, creating a spectacular, stunning scene for first-time visitors. Azure's 40-man team stood at the front of the line, gazing at the Starlight Fortress in curiosity. There are so many Tier 3 experts here, one of Azure's Tier 3 players exclaimed, glancing at the line of players behind him. Tier 3 players were still incredibly rare, and even the various major powers considered their Tier 3 experts mainstays in the guild. However, Tier 3 experts were a common sight in the Starlight Fortress. Almost 1 out of every 10 players was a Tier 3 expert. It was amazing. I've heard that quite a few experts have come to the Starlight Fortress for the Demon God's legacy, but aren't there a little too many here? A level 110 Tier 3 male guardian knight, another Azure member, commented. He could sense that many of the Tier 3 experts he saw were Refinement Realm experts. Some had even reached the Flowing Water Realm as he had. The mana here feels different too. It's very calming and it somehow feels complete. Standing here it's easier to sense mana than elsewhere, a level 109 Tier 3 female elementalist said. If I could rest and train here, my mana control would improve far quicker than training in the outside world. While Azure's young talents chatted amongst themselves, Solitary Frost and Yen Xiaoqian stared at the fortress, just as surprised by its mana as everyone else. So, this is 3 supreme elements mana? It really is extraordinary, Yen Xiaoqian muttered as she sensed the flow of mana around her. At the same time, realization also dawned. It's no wonder why so many of Zero Wing's members have fully unlocked their mana bodies. If they live in such an environment, their mana control will only grow stronger with time. They'll also have a much easier time unlocking their mana body's potential. The Starlight Fortress's mana, which contained the 3 supreme elements, was no longer a secret to the various superpowers. Only, none of the superpowers had bothered to expose this secret to the public. Naturally, independent players with keen senses had kept their mouths shut as well, since they wanted to take full advantage of the fortress's benefits. After all, the Starlight Fortress could only house a limited number of player residents. This environment is only a close match for that of ancient times? Solitary Frost wondered, shocked as he bathed in the fortress's mana. He hadn't thought the fortress's environment, which supposedly rivaled that of ancient times, was overly important. It was only close, not the real deal. How could any location in God's domain still have the same environment as before the Great Destruction? In his opinion, the past had only had so many more powerhouses than the present because of how many complete legacies had been available during ancient times. There was no way it could have been because of some ancient environment. Of course, the environment during ancient times had been incredibly mana-dense, but all of the various superpowers had their own special training grounds with high mana density. Some of those training grounds even had mana that was far denser than during ancient times. After reaching the Starlight Fortress and experiencing its mana firsthand, however, Solitary Frost realized how sorely mistaken he had been. Even as a melee player, he could feel his mana affinity growing. Although his affinity didn't increase much, only 10% to 20% at most, this had already significantly improved his mana control. At his standards, as long as he found a good place to train within the Starlight Fortress, he'd likely unlock his mana body's full potential within just 10 days. It was no wonder how Zero Wing had nurtured so many experts with fully unlocked mana bodies. The Starlight Fortress's environment even astounded Duan Han's Han. Damn it. This isn't what I was told. According to the Intelligence Department's report, the mana here should only help players with sharp perception of mana unlock their mana bodies, not ordinary Tier 3 experts. When Duan Han's Han glanced back at the players waiting to enter the fortress, he couldn't help the urge to pummel Azure's Intelligence Department. Duan Han's Han didn't realize that Azure's intelligence reports had been, for the most part, accurate regarding the fortress's environment when it had first opened, but as time had passed, and the Starlight Fortress's magic array had continued to absorb more of the three supreme elements' mana from its surroundings, the fortress's mana had steadily improved. Now, even Tier 3 experts who barely noticed mana could reap immense benefits from the Starlight Fortress's environment. As Azure's members fell into a heated discussion over the fortress's mana, a crimson-eyed, blonde woman in silver light armor and carrying a runic greatsword emerged from the fortress. The players in line fell silent the moment they noticed this woman. She was none other than Phythalia, the Starlight Fortress's manager. Phythalia had taken care of many Tier 3 experts and teams that had tried to cause trouble outside of the Starlight Fortress. Just 2 days ago, she had single-handedly annihilated a Superpower's 100-man Tier 3 team. After her terrifying display of strength, some players who had still considered causing trouble abandoned the notion. Phythalia's inhuman strength was a direct result of unlocking her mana body's full potential, and now not even ordinary domain realm experts could be her match. Greetings. You must from the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Guild leader Black Flame is currently preoccupied, so I will lead you to the Fortress Lord's mansion, Phythalia gently announced. How is this possible? Solitary Frost's eyes twitched when he saw Phythalia approach to welcome their group. He and Phythalia were old acquaintances. He had constantly tried to challenge her, and they had clashed several dozen times. Unfortunately, he had lost every match. He had hoped to challenge Phythalia again after his training with Violet Sword. However, he had never dreamed that she'd be responsible for helping Zero Wing welcome them to the Starlight Fortress. This was the commander of Divine Tribe's Divine Hymn Legion they were talking about. Commander Phythalia, I didn't expect to find you here. I thought you'd have gone to the Demon God's shrine like every other expert, Duan Han's Han said, similarly surprised to see Phythalia. The Demon God's shrine in Star Valley had become a main training ground for domain realm experts due to the few special secret lands that were connected to the shrine. Not only could players acquire treasures in these secret lands, but they could also use the areas to grow stronger. Of course, only domain realm experts and incredibly strong peak experts could take advantage of these benefits. Due to the powerful monsters and traps within the secret lands, even ordinary peak experts would meet a swift end if they tried to explore them. Moreover, entering the Demon God's shrine wasn't an easy task. One would need a lot of manpower to secure enough entry passes, and to make matters worse, each pass was a single-use item. Generally, only superpowers near Star Valley chose to send their experts to the Demon God's shrine. However, Phythalia was different. Divine Tribe had the only temporary residence within the Starlight Fortress. Entering the Demon God's shrine should be a piece of cake for her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. While the Demon God's shrine is useful, training in the Fortress Lord's Mansion's battlefield is far better. It's a pity that the battlefield can only accommodate a limited number of people, or I'd use it constantly, Phythalia said, a bitter smile forming as she shook her head. At the same time, she flashed Azure's members an envious look. Due to the recent partnership between Azure and Zero Wing, Feng had decided to allow these young talents to train in the Fortress Lord's Mansion's large battlefield for free for a few days. There's a better place than the Demon God's shrine? The news astonished Solitary Frost. For experts of his and Phythalia's caliber, growing stronger by training was incredibly difficult. The fact that the Demon God's shrine could help domain realm experts was amazing. If not for the problem of distance and manpower, Azure's domain realm experts would have long since made their way to the shrine. And yet, Phythalia insisted that training in the Starlight Fortress's Fortress Lord's mana was even more effective than training in the Demon God's shrine. How could he possibly believe such an outlandish claim? Let's pause our conversation for a moment. Our time is limited. We should head to the mansion immediately, Phythalia said, ignoring the confused looks Azure's members gave her and leading these players straight to the Fortress Lord's mansion. Chapter 26-23, Zero Wing's True Foundation? Starlight Fortress, Fortress Lord's Mansion. As the heart of the Starlight Fortress, the mana within the Fortress Lord's Mansion had changed significantly. From the outside, it looked as if the mansion and its surroundings were encased in a layer of crystals, and the breathtaking sight attracted every passerby's attention. Amazing. The mana here is at least 50% denser than in the outside world. It's no wonder why you deem this to be an excellent training ground, Commander Phythalia, Duan Hanshan praised as he marveled at the glittering castle before him. The Starlight Fortress's mana density had already been extraordinary. It had been so high that it had even rivaled, possibly surpassed, the various superpowers' special training grounds. However, the Fortress Lord's Mansion had even denser mana. One would be hard-pressed to find another location on the Western continent with such dense mana. If players could train in such rich, special mana, their efficiency would skyrocket. Even domain realm experts like Duan Hanshan could likely benefit from an environment with such abundant mana. However, Phythalia merely chuckled in response. Without comment, she led Azure's group into the heavily guarded Fortress Lord's Mansion. When they stepped into the mansion grounds, Duan Hanshan and his entourage from Azure were utterly stupefied. Aside from the multitude of Zero Wings experts, over 50 personal guards stood guard around the courtyard. Even the weakest of these NPCs was a secret silver guard, and there were as many as 8 fine gold guards present. These NPCs could even annihilate a 1,000-man team of Tier 3 experts. Once their surprise subsided, Azure's members realized how refreshed and light they felt, as if newer, better bodies had replaced their old ones. What's going on? Why do I feel like I have so much more physical control? Solitary Frost exclaimed as he sensed the changes. Dense mana shouldn't have such an effect. It's not just our physical control. I can feel my mana control significantly improving as well, Xiaoqian said in the team chat. It's no wonder why Guild Leader Black Flame is so confident that he can help us fully unlock our mana bodies quickly and cross the 100% threshold. They had experienced plenty of mana-rich environments before, including places with denser mana than the Fortress Lord's Mansion, yet none of those places had affected them in this way. They hadn't moved past the mansion's front courtyard, yet Xiaoqian sensed a tremendous increase to her combat power. If she could train here for a while, she was confident that she'd reach the domain realm in no time. Her mana control would reach a whole new level as well. Sensing the changes, Duan Hanshan turned to Phythalia and asked, Commander Phythalia, didn't our agreement with Guild Leader Black Flame only entail 3 training slots? Has there been some mistake? According to Azure's agreement with Feng, Azure would receive 40 entry slots into Violet Sword's ancient secret land. As a bonus, Zero Wing would also help 3 of Azure's members unlock their mana body's full potential and break past the 100% threshold. Aside from Sinful Flame, Solitary Frost, and Xiaoqian, Azure's members had only come to the Starlight Fortress to prepare for the trip to the ancient secret land and undergo some simple training beforehand. However, Phythalia had led their entire team to this sacred training ground. There must have been some misunderstanding. There's no mistake. All of you will train here for the next few days. As for the 3 slots, those trainees will go somewhere else. Unfortunately, I don't qualify to go with them, Phythalia said, chuckling. The Fortress Lord's Mansion was a one-of-a-kind training environment, so it wasn't unexpected that Duan Hanshan would misunderstand. If possible, Divine Tribe would negotiate for a long-term alliance with Zero Wing to train in the Fortress Lord's Mansion, but it had a limited number of combat rooms. To ensure its own members could continue their development, Zero Wing could only afford to lease a few of these rooms. The only reason that Zero Wing was willing to splurge and lend 40 combat rooms to Azure's members was the high price the chamber had paid. What? The 3 candidates won't be trained here? Duan Hanshan was a little shocked. He still had his doubts that Feng could help Sinful Flame, Solitary Frost, and Xiaoqian unlock their mana body's full potential in a single day, much less help them cross the 100% threshold. However, after witnessing the Fortress Lord's Mansion, Duan Hanshan wondered if the feat were actually possible. After all, this environment drastically improved players' physical and mana control. Azure certainly had nothing like this. Not even Violet Sword had such a wondrous training environment. However, Phythalia had just clearly stated that this precious area wasn't the three candidates' trade carrot going somewhere even better. How could Duan Han possibly accept such a concept as truth? Even Solitary Frost and Yen Xiaoqian wondered if the commander were playing some trick, using this as an opportunity to boost Zero Wing's reputation. After giving the matter some thought, however, they quickly dismissed these assumptions. Phythalia had no reason to lie to them. Not only was she the commander of Divine Tribe's second strongest trump card legion, but she was also a famous expert in the West. Why would she lie about such a trivial matter? You're finally here. Our guild leader has been waiting for you for quite some time. The 3 people selected for training, please follow me. Everyone else, please wait outside. While Azure's members were dazed, a man wearing Zero Wing's guild emblem approached from the castle. However, neither Duan Han nor his team had noticed his presence. It felt as if this man didn't actually exist. Yin Tianxing? How is he so strong? Aren't his combat techniques basically a match for those 3 monsters? Duan Han gave the man before him a suspicious look. According to the report he received on Zero Wing, Yin Tianxing was only an ordinary domain realm expert, yet he had obviously made considerable progress in the domain realm. Yin Tianxing was now entirely capable of standing toe-to-toe with Butterfly Belle and her comrades. Uncle Han, should we go? Yin Xiaoqian asked. Go on. Make sure you listen to Elder Flame later, understand? Duan Han said, nodding. He had only seen Zero Wing as a guild with no foundation, relying entirely on its guild leader for its success. In fact, most superpowers assumed Zero Wing's overall combat power was only on par with ordinary superpowers. However, when it came to other aspects such as nurturing talented players, Zero Wing couldn't even compare. The guild would need a miracle to become an ordinary superpower in the future. However, Duan Han realized how wrong he and the various superpowers had been after entering Starlight Fortress's Fortress Lord's mansion. Understood. Yin Xiaoqian and Solitary Frost replied, standing at attention. Please, lead the way. Sinful Flame turned to Yin Tianxing once Duan Han had finished instructing the 2 youngsters. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You follow me, Yin Tianxing responded with a nod. Yin Tianxing then led Sinful Flames 3 into the mansion's lobby and to the legacy room, which was located in the heart of the mansion. 2 level 122 tier 3 fine gold guards stood before the legacy room. Not even Sinful Flame would dare make a rash move before these 2 personal guards. When the doors parted, Sinful Flame and the 2 young experts noticed a man standing in the legacy room. He was manipulating the room's magic array, and all of the elemental mana within flowed around him. As the man continued his work, the mana around him grew astonishingly dense, eventually condensing into a white mist. Elemental control? Mana mist? How is this possible? Yin Xiaoqian stared with wide eyes, shocked at the man within the room. Chapter 26-24, Astonishing Legacy Room. The term elemental control was foreign to ordinary players and most expert players. Normally, players would only understand what elemental control was after they had reached tier 3 and started attempting to unlock their mana bodies. To achieve elemental control was to exert precision control over every type of mana. To accomplish that, one had to understand the properties of the different types of mana in existence. At the very least, one had to grasp the principles behind driving the 4 major elements. At this stage of the game, however, let alone gaining precision control over the various types of mana, the superpowers were still clueless about the operating principles of the 4 major elements. Hence, even domain realm magical class players were incapable of elemental control. Yet, to Yin Xiaoqian's surprise, the man standing inside the legacy room was controlling the ambient mana within the room as if it were a part of his own body and was even using it to strengthen the room's magic array. This was an ability all magical class players in God's domain sought. However, what truly surprised her was the identity of this man. Black Flame. After all, melee classes were inherently less attuned to mana than magical classes. In addition, melee players used mana much less frequently in battle than magical class players, so they should be less familiar with mana than magical class players. Yet, despite being a tier 3 sword king, Feng had actually achieved elemental control. You're here, Feng said and promptly accelerated the operation of the legacy room's magic array. He then continued, the room's magic array is nearly fully operational. The 3 of you will be learning how to unlock your mana bodies here. In a while, each of you will have 5 minutes to experience what it feels like to have a fully unlocked mana body. What you need to do during this time is memorize the feeling of how the mana inside your body flows. Afterward, you will have to think of ways to replicate this feeling. Remember, each of you has only one opportunity. Experience a fully unlocked mana body for 5 minutes? Xiaoqian was surprised at Feng's words. Although the experience lasted only 5 short minutes, if she knew what her fully unlocked mana body would feel like, she would have a much easier time unlocking it afterward. Moreover, she wouldn't have to worry about going astray and taking a long detour. She could simply head straight to her goal. So, this is the secret behind Zero Wing's strength? Solitary Frost similarly gazed at Feng in astonishment. Currently, the various superpowers of God's domain were already struggling to find a location that could help players improve their mana control. Zero Wing, however, could allow players to experience how it felt to have a fully unlocked mana body for 5 minutes. The guild was standing on a completely different playing field from the various superpowers. It's no wonder Zero Wing has so many experts with fully unlocked mana bodies. If the other superpowers were to find out about this, they'd most likely die of envy. Sinful Flame took a closer look at the legacy room upon hearing Feng's explanation. While players could fully unlock their mana bodies given enough time, the sooner a player did so, the sooner they could venture into locations that remained forbidden to ordinary Tier 3 players and obtain opportunities there. They would also have more time for other things. After all, exploring the mana body took up a lot of time and energy. Hence, shortening this exploratory period was also something the various superpowers were currently working on. After fully activating the legacy room's magic array, Feng turned his gaze to Sinful Flame and the others and asked, "Alright, who's first?" "I'll go first. Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian will enter after me," Sinful Flame said. Both Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian nodded in agreement, neither of them dissatisfied by Sinful Flame's decision, as they understood that the first person to experience the legacy room would benefit the least. After all, none of them knew what it felt like to possess a fully unlocked mana body, so they didn't know what they should do to maximize the benefits from the legacy room. By going in later, they would have Sinful Flame's opinions and suggestions for getting a better experience. "Very well. Elder Flame, please," Feng said as he walked out of the legacy room and gestured for Sinful Flame to enter. Once Sinful Flame entered the legacy room, its doors promptly shut. Silence then fell over the antechamber. Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian could not help growing nervous and curious as they eyed the closed doors. Even now, they remained dubious of being able to fully unlock their mana bodies within a day. After all, the further one unlocked one's mana body, the more difficult additional progress became. This wasn't a feat that could be accomplished just by briefly experiencing having a fully unlocked mana body. Trial and error required a lot of time. Meanwhile, as Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian were entertaining such thoughts, 5 minutes flew by. In the next moment, the doors to the legacy room slowly opened, and dense mana poured out the doorway. Both Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian were stunned when they saw Sinful Flame walk out. They could tell that the dense mana coming from the room actually belonged to Sinful Flame. Moreover, the aura Sinful Flame radiated was suffocatingly strong. "Elder Flame, did you fully unlock your mana body?" Xiaoqian exclaimed in disbelief. She knew that previously Sinful Flame had unlocked his mana body's potential to only a little over 80%, so reaching 100% should still take him quite some time. Now, just 5 minutes after entering the legacy room, he had already fully unlocked his mana body. How could she believe this? At this moment, let alone Xiaoqian, even Feng was surprised by this situation. Originally, he had intended to use the remaining 3 slots to the legacy room on Zero Wing's experts that had good potential. However, in order to obtain Azure's trust and its Void Realm legacy, he had no choice but to give them to Azure. Even so, Azure's 3 candidates should still emerge from the legacy room a little way off from fully unlocking their mana bodies. After all, unlike Fire Dance and the others, Sinful Flame's 3 did not get to experience the trial inside the legacy gate and gain a significant amount of knowledge relating to the mana body. Hence, Feng had been prepared to give them 3 of the ancient potions he had obtained from Poison City. Coupled with the effects of the Fortress Lord's Mansion's combat rooms, those should make it possible for Azure's 3 candidates to fully unlock their mana bodies within 1 day. Feng never thought that Sinful Flame's talent would be this high. Sinful Flame had actually succeeded in fully unlocking his mana body after just 1 trip into the legacy room. His talents were terrifying. During the brief moment Feng was in shock, Sinful Flame turned to look at Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian and advised, "Once you two are inside, Don't use the methods you previously used to operate your mana body to experience your fully unlocked mana body. Instead, just focus on sensing how the mana inside your mana body flows. There are many mistakes in the methods we researched. If you insist on using your previous notions to experience your fully unlocked mana body, you'll have a difficult time gaining any improvements. Moreover, while inside, I sense that reaching 100% potential isn't the end for the mana body, but a new beginning. Even though I have fully unlocked my mana body now, I can feel that it is still inferior to the mana body I had inside the room. However, my talents are limited, so I only manage this much for now. Just like Guild Leader Black Flame said, give everything you have into memorizing the sensations you feel while inside the room and don't think of anything unnecessary. Only by doing so will you be able to gain a greater harvest. You might even cross the 100% threshold through this opportunity. Upon hearing Sinful Flame's words, Yan Tianxing, who stood to one side, nodded his head thoughtfully. As for Solitary Frost and Yan Xiaoqian, they glanced reflexively at Shi Feng in embarrassment. Previously, they hadn't placed much importance on Shi Feng's words, treating them as mere chatter. They had failed to realize that Shi Feng was actually giving them pointers. In reality, even Shi Feng was startled by Sinful Flame's words. After all, he hadn't been giving any serious advice before, just stating the basic method for utilizing the legacy room. Of course, Shi Feng did not show his surprise on his face, simply nodded silently at Sinful Flame's words. Following which, Solitary Frost and Yan Xiaoqian also entered the legacy room one after another. Time flowed like running water and 3 days went by quickly. In an ancient forest in the faraway Silver Moon Empire, Violet Light City stood on a mountaintop, overlooking the entire forest. The city teemed with mythologies and Violet Sword's members. Instructor Tori and the others from Violet Sword had arrived quite some time ago and were currently standing above the city's front gate. Instructor Tori, everyone's ready? Now we're just waiting for Zero Wings members, Crimson Star reported as she approached Tori. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I heard that Mythology partnered with several superpowers. Their raid team attempted the elite trial yesterday. The 200-man raid team consisted entirely of bona fide Void Realm experts, some of whom even have fully unlocked mana bodies. However, I heard that even a fully unlocked mana body was of limited help inside the trial. In the end, Mythology's raid team failed to defeat the trial boss. Although Zero Wing has a lot of experts with fully unlocked mana bodies, they hardly have any Void Realm experts in the guild. I wonder if they can even reach the Hero Trial's trial boss? Wildfighter said, smirking. I'm afraid that's going to be difficult. I really don't know what Black Flame was thinking back then to suggest filling the majority of the raid team with Zero Wings members. If he finds out about Mythology's failure, he'll most likely die of regret, Crimson Star said, smiling. Once they team wipe a few times, I bet he'll come asking us for reinforcements. The Ancient Secret Lands Elite Trial already reduced the advantages of a fully unlocked mana body by a large margin. If not for Mythology's raid members having extremely high combat standards, they wouldn't even have reached the Elite Trial's trial boss, much less get the chance to fight it. If even the Elite Trial placed such a heavy suppression on the mana body, the suppression in the Hero Trial would naturally be much greater. In that case, the chances of Zero Wings' raid team, which barely had any peak experts in it, meeting the Hero Trial's trial boss were practically zero. While Wildfighter and Crimson Star were conversing, a steel behemoth and several gigantic flying mounts approached Violet Light City, their arrival causing a commotion throughout Violet Light City. Chapter 26-25, Foolish Azure, they're finally here. When Wildfighter saw the approaching Crimson Dragon flying ship and flying mounts, he revealed a faint smile on his face as he commented, "What a grand entrance. It's a pity that they don't know just how much suppression the Ancient Secret Lands trial places on the mana bodies of players. In the end, they'll just be wasting their time and energy. Too bad we have to waste our chance to challenge the Hero Trial as well," Crimson Star said, sighing. Although Violet Sword had managed to produce the necessary tools for prolonging players' survival inside the Ancient Secret Land ahead of schedule, thanks to Silent Wonder's help, and caught up to Mythology's production speed, Violet Sword had also lost an opportunity to surpass Mythology. Based on their understanding of the Ancient Secret Land's Elite Trial, they were bound to conquer it if given another 10 days or so. However, the privileges players would obtain from the Elite Trial were far inferior to those of the Hero Trial. This matter is no longer relevant. Although we will be losing our opportunity to challenge the Hero Trial, Mythology won't necessarily be able to clear it either. In the end, our guilds will end up even, Tori said calmly. Looking at the Crimson Dragon flying ship slowly descending from the sky, he continued, "Rather than us, Zero Wing will be the one in great trouble if it fails to conquer the hero trial." "That's right. Zero Wing has most likely made the worst possible decision this time," Wildfighter said, nodding in agreement with Tori's words. Zero Wing had dispatched over 100 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies to challenge the ancient secret land this time. While this would indeed increase Zero Wing's reputation, it would also attract plenty of hidden dangers to the guild. In the current God's domain, the competition between the various superpowers was intensifying. If a guild capable of threatening the livelihoods of the superpowers were to appear, the fate of this guild would go without saying. After today, quite a few superpowers would probably join hands to exterminate this rising threat. Of course, if Zero Wing overcame the hero trial, then it would have a much easier time dealing with those future problems. Conversely, failure would mean a nightmare for the guild. According to the report we received, Zero Wing has come to an agreement with Azure. In exchange for borrowing Azure's strength, Zero Wing has agreed to nurture some of Azure's young talents. If on top of Azure's help, Zero Wing asks us to send in a large number of peak experts, Zero Wing might actually have a fighting chance of defeating the trial boss, Crimson Star said. The only question now is whether Zero Wing will make this request or not. Azure's leaders have gone insane. While Zero Wing's top combatants are indeed exceedingly strong, how could Zero Wing possibly be a match for Violet Sword in nurturing talents? Because of this matter, many in the guild's upper echelon are very dissatisfied with Azure, Wildfighter said in exasperation. The guild leader also declared that we are to stop nurturing Azure's young talents from now on. With this, Azure has basically severed Solitary Frost's and Xiaoqian's futures. Tori revealed an ugly expression at the mention of this matter. As for Crimson Star, she shook her head and sighed when she thought about the futures of those two talents. Setting aside Azure's other members, Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian were people capable of catching Tori's eye. They had the potential to become legendary figures in Azure. This was just like the commander of Violet Sword's strongest trump card Legion. Back then the commander had similarly caught Tori's eye. Now he had already become a legendary figure in Violet Sword, his strength rivaling even the 5 great super guild's old monsters. Such experts could bring prosperity to an entire guild. Moreover, Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian's youth meant they could guarantee stability for Azure for the next 2 or 3 decades. Now, however, Azure had personally severed the futures of these two people. During the time Wildfighter and the others were conversing with each other, the Crimson Dragon flying ship and the flying mounts landed before Violet Light City's main gate. A short moment later, cloaked players could be seen alighting from the Crimson Dragon flying ship and flying mounts. These players had used their black cloaks to conceal only their statistics. They did not bother covering up their appearances and guild emblems, so it was very easy to discern their identities. It seems Azure is taking its partnership with Zero Wing quite seriously. It actually sent Sinful Flame along on this expedition, Crimson Star exclaimed when she saw Sinful Flame jumping off one of the flying mounts. Sinful Flame was well known throughout the Western continent. His combat standards and combat power were extraordinary, and even in Violet Sword, one would be hard-pressed to find an expert who could match him. Normally, legendary figures like Sinful Flame would have a high degree of freedom in their guilds. Only when the guild encountered truly troublesome matters would they take action. Sure enough, Solitary Frost has come as well. If he finds out that Floating Light gained an opportunity to receive special training in the ancient secret land because of Azure's actions, he'll most likely die of envy. Wildfighter sighed when he noticed Solitary Frost among the Azure members present. Aside from the trial challenges, the ancient secret land also housed a few special locations offering incredible training environments. Only the price to enter these special locations was stupendous. Originally, out of respect for the Zeus Corporation and instructor Tori, Violet Sword had been hesitant to assign the last 2 entry slots it held. However, due to Azure's recent actions, Violet Sword's upper echelon decided to grant one of the slots to one of its young talents, Floating Light. In terms of talent, Floating Light was inferior to Solitary Frost. However, because he had received Tori's personal guidance while training inside the ancient secret land's special environment, his combat standards had undergone a qualitative transformation. Now he could partially integrate bronze combat techniques with his Tier 3 skills. Had Solitary Frost, who possessed superior talents, received the same training as well, his combat power would similarly skyrocket. At that time, Wildfighter might no longer be able to hold back when fighting him. Unfortunately, Solitary Frost missed out on this opportunity. Instructor Tori, how is the preparation of the special tools coming along? Feng asked as he arrived before Tori. They're all ready, Tori assured. Glancing at the group of nearly 200 players standing behind Feng, he asked, how many people do you wish us to send, Guild Leader Black Flame? What do you think of 30? Feng replied. After all was said and done, this was a partnership between Zero Wing and Violet Sword. Hence, after giving the matter some thought, he decided to have Violet Sword send 30 players to join the raid team, a number that was neither too high nor too low. With this, when the raid succeeded, Violet Sword wouldn't seem completely unrelated. The Super Guild should also have no problem dispatching this number of peak experts. 30? That's fine with us, Tori said while stroking his white beard. He then turned to Wildfighter and Crimson Star and said, afterward, you two will personally lead the team and provide your full support to Guild Leader Black Flame. Understood. Wildfighter and Crimson Star responded simultaneously. However, when Violet Sword's experts heard Tori commanding Wildfighter and Crimson Star to participate in the raid, they were baffled. In their opinion, it was already a big deal for Tori to have Vice Commander Floating Light, a domain realm expert, take part in the raid. They never thought that he would have two of the guild's prestigious instructors participate as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Anybody capable of becoming an instructor in Violet Sword was part of the core upper echelon of the guild. Rarely would these individuals lead a guild expedition. And if they did, the mission would normally be critical. Now, however, Tori was actually sending not one, but two instructors to participate in the raid. If word of this matter spread, it would definitely cause a sensation in the guild. Alright, make the necessary preparations according to our previous arrangements, Wildfighter commanded as he looked at the team of experts standing behind him. At Wildfighter's command, 28 of the peak and apex experts present promptly went into action. Guild Leader Black Flame, please follow me. We still need to walk quite a distance to reach the secret land's entrance, Crimson Star said calmly as she approached Feng. Once we arrive there, I believe all the necessary items should be ready. Alright, I'll be troubling you then, Feng said, nodding. He then had everyone on his team follow Crimson Star into Violet Light City. Chapter 26-26, Ancient Mana. The sight of Crimson Star guiding Zero Wing's team through Violet Light City triggered discussions among the players residing in the city. Who are those people? Violet Sword's Crimson Star is actually guiding them. It's not just Crimson Star. I heard that Violet Sword's instructor Tori personally welcomed those people at the front gate just now. Amazing. Could those people be big shots of some super guild? Mythology's members grew curious when they saw Feng's group. Violet Sword's members, on the other hand, found this situation astonishing. Crimson Star was one of Violet Sword's Grand Elders. Even when the guild leader of an ordinary superpower visited Violet Sword, she would appear only to give a brief greeting at most. She definitely wouldn't take the initiative to guide them. Meanwhile, standing on the walls protecting the ancient castle in the heart of Violet Light City, a team of 30-plus players was quietly observing Feng's group. Every member of this team was a Tier 3 expert at level 113 or above. Zero Wing's members are finally here, an assassin youth with two short swords said coldly as he eyed Feng with killing intent. Sandstorm, you'd better not do anything rash. They are currently Violet Sword's guests. A tall woman carrying a warhammer and a sturdy shield, standing beside the youth, warned. Relax. I know that much, Sandstorm assured as he concealed his killing intent. However, our agreement with Violet Sword is limited to the city. Once they enter the secret land, they'll be fair game. At that time, we'll get our revenge for the humiliation we suffered at the Starlight Fortress. I'm going to teach Zero Wing how foolish it is to offend our vice commander. That's for sure, the tall woman said, nodding. Although the Vice Commander's orders were to investigate first what Zero Wing and Violet Sword are up to inside the secret land before taking action against them, I'm sure she won't say anything about it if we just take care of Zero Wing as soon as they enter the secret land. After all, the demon god has clearly specified that if we manage to kill Black Flame even once, we'll receive a large number of contribution points and be able to train in the battlefields inside the demon god's shrine. If we bring him to the demon god, we can even receive the demon god's legacy directly. Previously, Black Flame only managed to win against us because of his fully unlocked mana body. However, he won't be as lucky this time, Sandstorm said, a smirk appearing on his face. This time he'll learn what true despair feels like. The demon god's shrine was an extraordinary training ground, which was something every superpower on the Western continent knew. However, most superpowers were still unaware that the demon god's shrine contained some legacies related to unlocking the mana body, which one could obtain only by completing one of the 10 great quests offered in the shrine. Mythology was one of the few superpowers that had managed to complete one of the 10 great quests and obtain a mana body legacy. As a result, Sandstorm and a few other members in Mythology had already fully unlocked their mana bodies. With the support of the Super Guild Special Advanced Battle Array, their combat power had now reached a completely different level. Just their team of 30-plus players were more than capable of defeating the entirety of Netherworld Empire's Hell Legion. During the time Sandstorm and the other members of Mythology were discussing how to attack Zero Wings Group, Feng and the others had arrived before the ancient Secret Land's entrance, which was inside the central castle. The entrance to the Secret Land was a spatial tear leading to the other world where the ancient city stood. Normally, spatial tears were incredibly unstable. However, a magic array had been laid to stabilize the spatial tear, so instability was not a problem. Unfortunately, due to the ravages of time, the magic array was no longer as powerful as it was before. Now, it could grant the teleportation mark, which held the spatial coordinates of the ancient Secret Land, to only a maximum of 400 players that entered the spatial tear. These teleportation marks would be replenished only after the players that held these marks had left the Secret Land. So, this is an ancient Secret Land? When Feng arrived before the spatial tear and sensed the mana flowing from it, he was astonished. In the past, he had only heard and seen pictures of Violet Sword's ancient Secret Land. He had never experienced it. Now, just brushing against the excess mana flowing from the ancient Secret Land filled him with energy. If even the effects of the excess mana were already so potent, Feng found it difficult to imagine how standing inside the ancient Secret Land itself would feel like. For a moment, he wished he could stay inside the ancient Secret Land forever. Guild leader Black Flame, here is your alchemy array, Crimson Star said as she handed a black cylinder to Feng. Make sure to use it before you enter. It will help you fend off the overly strong mana inside and prevent you from exploding from mana overload. At the same time, it will allow you to regulate the flow of your mana effectively so that you won't die from energy exhaustion. Thanks. Feng nodded and accepted the black cylinder from Crimson Star. He then activated the magic array on the device. A special rune appeared on his body, followed by a faint layer of light wrapped around him. Although the ancient Secret Land was an excellent location for training for current players, it was both a curse and a blessing. Incredibly dense mana filled the ancient Secret Land. The ambient mana in the Secret Land was so dense that players would have their mana's volume and flow rate forcibly increased to a point where they would lose control over their own mana. As a result, their energy consumption rate would increase drastically, which led to death by starvation within half an hour of entering the ancient Secret Land. If players wished to survive inside the ancient Secret Land for longer periods, they had to rely on alchemy arrays to regulate their mana. Even so, players could remain inside the ancient Secret Land for only 7 days. The alchemy array used was a consumable. Hence, Violet Sword was desperately trying to increase the production speed and volume of this alchemy array. Otherwise, even if they held the ancient Secret Land, they could only stare at it. After Feng and his group were all ready, Crimson Star led them into the spatial tear and disappeared from the castle. Everyone was immediately teleported to a dense forest. All around them were ancient trees towering over 100 meters. Translucent crystals adorned these trees, giving the trees and the forest a mesmerizing beauty. The mana inside the forest was also so dense that it had condensed into white mist. However, despite the white mist, everyone's vision remained unaffected. During the time everyone was enjoying the scenery around them, a roar suddenly came from a distance and echoed throughout the forest. Upon turning toward the origin of the roar, everyone quickly noticed a 200-meter-tall one-horned bear fighting an equally tall six-eyed ape. Every one of the two beasts' actions shook the entire forest and deformed the terrain around the monsters. Damn it! Why are two region chiefs fighting each other? Crimson Star frowned as she watched the battle of the two giant behemoths. The ancient Secret Land was an incredibly dangerous place. Not only were there plenty of monsters here, but each region in the Secret Land would have a powerful boss ruling over it. Violet Sword and Mythology had labeled these bosses region chiefs. The weakest among these region chiefs was already a level 120 mythic monster with combat standards at the Trial Tower's 6th floor. In addition, all monsters found within the ancient Secret Land had incredibly powerful bodies. Even an ordinary level 120 mythic monster here could rival a level 120 mythic ranked archaic species found in the outside world. Normally, Both Violet Swords and Mythology's members would do their best to avoid these region chiefs when visiting the ancient secret land. The reason for this wasn't just the high casualty rate incidental to challenging these region chiefs. There was also the fact that fights with these region chiefs would attract the attention of nearby monsters. Players that fought a region chief would end up having to fight a continuously increasing number of monsters and eventually suffer annihilation. 2 region chiefs appearing in this location could be considered to be the worst-case scenario. In the outside world, there were indeed instances where players could take advantage of monsters fighting each other. However, the monsters inside the ancient secret land were incredibly smart. So long as they sensed the presence of players, they would promptly stop fighting each other and cooperate to kill the intruding players first before resuming their fight. They wouldn't give players any opportunities to take advantage of at all. Why is our luck so horrid? We actually came across 2 region chiefs having a territorial battle. Sandstorm, who was currently hidden on a tree some distance away from Feng's group, complained in frustration when he saw the 2 fighting behemoths straying closer to his team's position. Alright, forget about Zero Wing for now. We need to leave this place quickly. We'll be doomed if those 2 region chiefs discover us, the tall, female guardian knight standing beside Sandstorm said. I know, Sandstorm said, gritting his teeth as he shot a glare at the distant Feng. As Sandstorm's group was preparing to leave the area, Crimson Star also had everyone on the team prepare for a hasty retreat. Guild leader Black Flame, we need to leave this area fast. We'll be in trouble if we stay here any longer, Crimson Star said hurriedly as she looked at Feng, who was still quietly observing the 2 battling region chiefs. Shouldn't that way be the shortest path to the ancient city? Feng asked as he pointed toward the 2 behemoths. If we circle around them, wouldn't we need to waste half a day? That is, indeed, the shortest path to the ancient city, but if we get caught by those 2 region chiefs instead of wasting half a day, all of us will end up dying here, Crimson Star snapped in exasperation when she heard that Feng was actually still planning to take this route to the ancient city. However, she also understood Feng's thoughts. They could stay inside the ancient secret land for only 7 days. If they wasted half a day on a detour, they would be under much greater pressure when raiding the hero trial. After all, with how many monsters there were inside the trial, they would need 5 or 6 days just to reach the trial boss. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Moreover, the 2 region chiefs were mythic bosses. In the outside world, coming across 2 mythic bosses would be akin to hitting the jackpot. However, they were currently inside the ancient secret land, facing monsters far stronger than those in the outside world. Challenging 2 mythic bosses simultaneously would simply be suicide. Otherwise, Violet Sword wouldn't have to be so careful when exploring the ancient secret land. Guild leader Black Flame, let's leave. If we don't go now, we'll enter the perception range of those 2 region chiefs, Wildfighter advised urgently. Our main goal is to clear the trial. We don't need to fight those 2 region chiefs. I guess you're right. We don't need to fight those 2, Feng said, nodding. He then turned to look at Crimson Star and Wildfighter and added, I'll lure them away. Use this opportunity to sneak past them. After saying so, Feng dashed straight for the 2 behemoths. Chapter 26-27, Feng soared. Upon seeing Feng charging toward the 2 distant behemoths, Crimson Star and Wildfighter turned pale. He's insane. Crimson Star cursed when she saw that Feng had already gotten over 100 yards away. Immediately, she turned to the rest of the team and ordered, Everyone retreat together with floating light. Do not stop for anything. Retreat to Violet Light City. Wildfighter, hold the rear with me. Got it? Wildfighter responded and unsheathed his weapon, a solemn expression appearing on his face. In this situation, Violet Sword's members could not help growing nervous. As for Sandstorm and the other members of Mythology spectating from a distance, their eyes nearly fell out of their sockets when they saw Feng's actions. That crazy Black Flame. He's actually charging to the 2 region chiefs. Sandstorm cursed. Then he commanded hastily, Hurry! Retreat quickly. As soon as Sandstorm finished speaking, Mythology's members, who had been preparing to retreat from the area already, picked up their pace with serious expressions. Black Flame truly is insane. He's actually planning to drag everyone down with him. Did Violet Sword's people not warn him about the region chiefs here? The tall, female guardian knight grumbled, similarly cursing at Feng as she jumped down from the tree she had been standing on. The region chiefs of the ancient secret land were considerably stronger than mythic monsters found in the outside world. In terms of strength and speed, they were at least 30% better. Trying to take on just one of these region chiefs with a 200-man Tier 3 team was already an incredibly difficult task, incurring plenty of casualties. When coupled with the endless stream of other monsters that would continuously join in on the battle, any team that tried to challenge a region chief was doomed. However, what made the ancient secret lands region chiefs truly difficult to deal with wasn't their physical prowess but their massive perception range. When these region chiefs fought players, they could manipulate all the mana within a 5,000-yard radius, relying on this mana to detect all movements within range. One could say that so long as there were players within a region chief's passive perception range of 500 yards or players fighting a region chief, then all players within a 5,000-yard radius of the region chief would become its targets. If players failed to kill the aggravated region chief, then they wouldn't be able to shake off its pursuit. This was also the reason why Mythology and Violet Sword had labeled the mythic bosses in the ancient secret land region chiefs. Normally, teams that accidentally came across a region chief were still fine. The majority of the team's members had a chance to escape with their lives. However, only annihilation awaited teams that came across two region chiefs simultaneously. Even before the female guardian knight finished speaking, Mythology's members had already turned tail and run. However, after everyone had taken just a few strides, the mana around them suddenly stirred. At the same time, they felt as if a pair of eyes were looking down on them. Obviously, the two region chiefs had already locked onto their life auras. Damn it! Everyone split up and retreat. Every survivor counts. Sandstorm yelled. When he looked at Feng's distant figure, he felt himself going crazy. For a moment, he even suspected that Feng had deliberately provoked the two region chiefs. Meanwhile, when Crimson Star and the others saw the two region chiefs suddenly stop fighting and rapidly head in their direction, their complexions darkened. If they could not put a 5,000-yard distance between themselves and the two bosses, they had no hope of escaping the battle at all. A 5,000-yard distance. Even Tier 3 experts like themselves would still take quite some time to cover 5,000 yards. To make matters worse, tools were ineffective inside the ancient secret land, so they couldn't teleport away or accelerate their retreat from the battlefield. Crazy bastard. He's going to get us all killed. Floating Light, who was already retreating, cursed when he felt the two region chiefs locking onto his life aura. Although players wouldn't lose an entire level from dying inside the ancient secret land, the amount of EXP lost was still not a trivial matter. After all, at their level, just leveling up once took a lot of time. Hence, even a small percentage of their EXP equaled 1 or 2 days' worth of hard work. As Floating Light was leading the retreat of Violet Sword's members, he suddenly noticed something. Zero Wings and Azure's members were actually still standing in their original positions. It was as if they had not heard Crimson Star's orders at all. What are they doing? Are they planning to die with Black Flame? Floating Light was baffled as he looked at Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian. Setting the others aside, it was incredibly strange for Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian to defy Crimson Star. After all, the two of them were geniuses that had trained under Crimson Star during their sojourn at Violet Sword. The two of them knew very clearly how powerful and capable Crimson Star was. Crimson Star's calling for a retreat showed just how dangerous their current situation was, yet Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian had actually disobeyed her command and remained where they were. Moreover, they wore indescribably calm expressions, their reactions making it seem as if nothing was happening. Vice Commander, let's quickly retreat. This is Zero Wing and Azure's matter. Instructor Crimson Star and Instructor Wildfighter won't be able to hold off those two region chiefs for very long, a retreating Tier 3 assassin urged hurriedly when he noticed Floating Light pause. I guess you're right, Floating Light said, nodding before resuming his retreat. At the same time, he could not help glancing at Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian with pity. Originally, with Solitary Frost's and Xiaoqian's talents, they should have been able to shine brightly in God's domain. However, their futures were now ruined because they belonged to a guild like the Azure Chamber of Commerce and followed an unreliable team leader like Feng. However, Floating Light had just taken a few steps forward when the deafening roar of a bear came from behind him and echoed throughout the forest, causing it to tremble. Immediately afterward, a beam of mana shot past the area beside Floating Light's group, leaving behind a massive trench on the ground it passed through. Seen from afar, the ground looked like pudding that a spoon had scraped. The fight started? Floating Light's complexion further darkened as he took in the massive trench a short distance away. This was the power of the ancient secret land's mythic monsters. Any random attack of theirs could transform the terrain around them. Let alone one person, even a 100-man Tier 3 expert team would be cannon fodder in front of these region chiefs. If one really wished to take on a region chief, they would need a 200-man team of Tier 3 peak experts at the very minimum. Moreover, the team would need 2 or 3 domain realm MTs working together to tank the region chief. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stop the boss's attacks adequately. In fact, even a single mistake might result in a team wipe. After Floating Light's group ran for another 50 yards or so, a lightning bolt suddenly shot past them some distance away, followed by the ear-splitting crack of thunder. As the thunder faded, the sky above them darkened abruptly. In the next moment, the 200-meter-tall, six-eyed gorilla went flying overhead and crashed heavily into the ground a few hundred yards ahead of them, the ground shattering at the impact. As for the giant gorilla, it stumbled quite a bit as it landed and very nearly lost its footing. After stabilizing itself, the gorilla glared into the distance before releasing a deafening roar. It then charged forward, completely ignoring Floating Light and the other members of Violet Sword, who stood only a short distance away from it. What is going on? Floating Light was confounded by this situation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Violet Sword's other peak experts similarly could not help rubbing their eyes, thinking that they were hallucinating. However, no matter how much they rubbed, the several massive craters the six-eyed gorilla's feet left behind did not disappear. Before Floating Light and the others could react to this unexpected development, though, another deafening boom and the snapping of trees entered their ears. However, these sounds came from quite a distance away. There should still be some separation between the origin of these sounds and the six-eyed gorilla that had just charged past them. Floating Light and the others turn around reflexively, looking for the origin of these sounds. They spotted a cloaked man wielding 2 long swords standing atop a tree. Meanwhile, some distance away from this swordsman was a gigantic bear that had just steadied itself, glaring hatefully at him. The six-eyed gorilla was also stalking toward this man, seemingly searching for an opportunity to strike at him. However, Floating Light and the others could also see a hint of fear in the one-horned bear's and six-eyed gorilla's eyes. It was clear that the 2 region chiefs were afraid of the tiny human on the tree. Chapter 26-28. Suppressing the region chiefs. Floating Light and the other members of Violet Light gaped in shock at the man standing atop the gigantic tree that was over 100 meters tall. Just how high is his strength? Those were 2 level 120+ region chiefs. Either of those region chiefs could wipe out a 200-man Tier 3 team of peak experts. Facing both region chiefs, even a team of such caliber was sure to get annihilated. At this moment, however, Feng had single-handedly suppressed and even repelled the 2 region chiefs. This was simply unbelievable. Is this why they didn't retreat before? When Floating Light looked at the 2 region chiefs warily eyeing Feng and thought back to the fact that Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian had not moved even after Crimson Star gave the command to retreat, realization immediately dawned upon him. With such a monstrous team leader, there was indeed no need to retreat. At this moment, Floating Light and the other retreating members of Violet Sword weren't the only ones shocked by this situation. Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who were planning to hold the rear, as well as the frantically retreating members of Mythology, nearly had their eyes fall out of their sockets when this incredible scene played out before them. What did he do during this period? How did he raise his strength attribute to such an extent? Sandstorm's heart roiled with shock as he stared at Feng. During the fight at the Starlight Fortress, the strength Feng displayed was just close to reaching the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, he had relied on his fully unlocked mana body to do so. However, just how long had passed since that fight? In Sandstorm's opinion, even if Feng were incredibly lucky and obtained 1 or 2 pieces of epic equipment or gained some special encounters, he would be fortunate to match the strength of Tier 4 mythic monsters of the same level. At this moment, however, Feng's strength had actually grown to a level where he could overwhelm even the region chiefs of the ancient secret land. However, before anyone could snap out of their stupor, the 2 region chiefs took action once more. Firstly, the one-horned bear let loose an angry roar before slamming its front paws into the ground and shattering it. A 2-fold magic array then formed beneath Feng's feet, covering a 300-yard radius. Immediately afterward, thick stone walls emerged, bordering the magic array and enveloping Feng completely. Tier 4 spell Earth's Embrace. As the one-horned bear was taking action, the 6-eyed gorilla leaped into the sky above Feng. The gorilla then summoned a crimson magic array with a 400-yard radius above the swordsman. Tier 4 spell Fire Dragon's Descent. In the next moment, a fire dragon larger than the 6-eyed gorilla and made entirely out of flames emerged from the magic array. It spread its wings as it descended toward Feng. Those two region chiefs actually know how to coordinate their spells? Crap. That's cheating. Shouldn't mythic bosses be upright and use spells in turns? Everyone was stunned when they saw the two region chiefs' coordinated assault. Coordinating skills and spells was an extremely common thing for players. However, this was the first time they had seen monsters, particularly Tier 4 bosses, do so. Hence, everyone could not help despairing at the sight. For Tier 3 players like themselves, just one Tier 4 spell was already plenty difficult to deal with. If not handled appropriately, the result would very likely be an instant team wipe. If they had to go up against two coordinated Tier 4 spells, even Tier 3 MTs with their life-saving skills activated would be killed instantly, unless they had invulnerability skills or spells. It's really over this time. Crimson Star shook her head and sighed when she saw the two coordinated Tier 4 spells. If it were her, she could defend against one Tier 4 spell using a Tier 3 curse. However, even she would be powerless against two Tier 4 AoE spells. This didn't mean that she had just one Tier 3 curse in her arsenal of spells. In fact, she had several. Currently, however, it was simply impossible for her, and most likely all magical class players in God's domain, to double cast two Tier 3 curses. Haha. So what if you have amazing strength? Let's see how you deal with this. Sandstorm burst out in laughter when he saw the two region chiefs' coordinated assault on Feng. The swordsman's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. In fact, he felt powerless when he witnessed Feng's fearsome display, and it was definitely impossible for them to exact revenge on him this time. However, being able to see the two region chiefs killing Feng now wasn't a bad outcome either. After all, he knew that, because of the demon god's curse, the swordsman would suffer triple the death penalty every time he died. Although they were currently inside the ancient secret land where the death penalty was not as stringent as that in the outside world, a triple death penalty would still deal Feng a heavy blow. However, while everyone was looking at the gigantic fire dragon descending toward Feng, the swordsman surprisingly maintained his composure. Moreover, aside from Feng, the spectating members of Zero Wing and Azure also remained indescribably calm in this situation. Finally a chance. Solitary Frost muttered as he watched Feng closely, his eyes glittering with joy and excitement. At this moment, aside from Solitary Frost, everyone else from the Azure Chamber of Commerce also had excited expressions. What's wrong with them? Floating Light was perplexed as he looked at Solitary Frost and the others. Feng was about to die here, yet Solitary Frost and the others were actually feeling excited about it? Come. While Floating Light was fraught with confusion, Feng made his move. In the next moment, Feng sheathed Killing Ray and held the abyssal blade with both hands. He then jumped up from the treetop, propelling himself straight toward the descending fire dragon. He's going to resist the attack head-on? Floating Light could not help but disapprove of Feng's decision when he saw the swordsman heading for the fire dragon. A Tier 4 spell could exhibit much greater power than a mythic monster could with its physical body. This was especially true in the ancient Secret Lands environment. Due to the abundant mana here, skills and spells would exhibit much greater power than they normally could in the outside world. A Tier 4 spell cast by a mythic monster could instantly kill a Tier 3 metric tons who had a life-saving skill activated. Just as Feng was about to collide with the fire dragon, he suddenly raised the abyssal blade overhead and swung it at the fire dragon. Shatter. The phantom of a gigantic greatsword suddenly appeared in the sky, creating a pitch-black wall there as it slashed toward the descending fire dragon. First Sword Light Shadow. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In the next moment, the pitch-black wall not only bisected the fire dragon but also continued extending toward the six-eyed gorilla hovering over 100 yards above the fire dragon. Upon seeing the approach of the pitch-black wall, the six-eyed gorilla panicked and instinctively tried to flee the area. However, the pitch-black wall extended far too rapidly. Even though the six-eyed gorilla flew as fast as it could, it still failed to outmaneuver the pitch-black wall and ended up getting one of its arms cut off. The six-eyed gorilla let loose an agonized shriek that echoed throughout the forest at the grievous injury. Shortly afterward, an arm the size of a mountain fell into the forest below. A massive crater formed around the arm from the force of the impact. As for the six-eyed gorilla, it plummeted to the ground and tumbled helplessly for some distance. Due to the loss of its arm, the gorilla's combat power also decreased significantly. Chapter 26-29, Ancient Secret Lands Power? How is this possible? That's a mythic monster we're talking about. How could a Tier 3 player like him break through its defensive threshold? Crimson Star and Wildfighter could not believe their eyes as they watched the tumbling six-eyed gorilla. Not only had Feng shattered a Tier 4 spell with a single move, but he had even used the same move to injure the six-eyed gorilla severely. On paper, the gorilla had only lost around 500,000 HP from the attack, which was nothing compared to its 2 billion HP, but in reality his attack had caused far more damage than that. There were two general types of attacks in God's domain. The first type reduced the HP of the target, while the other weakened the target's defenses. In the case of the former, if the target's HP fell to 0, then they would die. In the case of the latter, if the target had its defenses destroyed, then its physical body would suffer damage, which would, in turn, reduce the target's combat power as well as the difficulty of killing said target. Only, it was incredibly difficult for players to execute attacks capable of destroying a monster's defenses, particularly those of high-ranking monsters, as the stronger a monster was, the higher its defensive threshold would be. Normally, players couldn't destroy the defenses of a monster of the same tier, much less those of a higher tier. The best players could do against higher-tiered monsters was cause minor injuries and continuously stack these minor injuries to reduce the monster's combat power. Against the six-eyed gorilla, only an attack carrying power at the peak Tier 4 standard had a chance of overwhelming its defensive threshold. However, despite being a Tier 3 player, Feng had actually managed this feat without resorting to external tools. This was inconceivable. Meanwhile, when Sandstorm and the other members of Mythology saw this scene, they too gaped in shock. Can he still be considered a player? There were no words to describe the shock Sandstorm felt as he gazed at Feng right now. In the eyes of ordinary players, having the ability to surpass a monster's defensive threshold only meant that they could reduce the combat power of the target monster. However, for peak experts and apex experts who frequently fought high-tiered monsters, having such an ability held an entirely different meaning. For peak experts and apex experts, having such an ability meant that they could solo kill monsters. The monsters in God's domain were born with high HP and defense, particularly HP. Even if players could inflict over 1 million damage with their attacks, this amount of damage was nothing for high-tiered monsters like mythic monsters. Such damage wouldn't overcome the monster's battle recovery. An army of players was necessary to kill high-tiered monsters. Hence, in God's domain, it was common knowledge that even if a player's raw power surpassed that of high-tiered monsters, solo killing these monsters would still be impossible, especially Grand Lords or higher-ranked monsters. This held true even for current Tier 3 players. However, there was one method that players could use to defeat such high-tiered monsters: executing attacks surpassing the target monster's defensive threshold. Attacks that surpassed a monster's defensive threshold could inflict severe injuries on the monster's physical body. Moreover, after injuring a monster up to a certain point, aside from reducing the monster's combat power, players could also force monsters into a weakened state, which would drastically reduce their defense and maximum HP. If players managed to corner a monster to the point where it entered a heavily weakened state, they could even impose the HP loss debuff on the target monster and thoroughly nullify the monster's battle recovery. If a monster lost its battle recovery, which was also its strongest ability, solo killing it would no longer be impossible. With sufficient stamina and concentration, players could slowly but surely grind the monster to death. Now that Feng was capable of surpassing the six-eyed gorilla's defensive threshold, this meant that Feng could solo kill it. Meanwhile, a player having the ability to solo kill a Tier 4 mythic monster was simply unheard of in God's domain. At this moment, however, let alone the spectating players, even Feng himself found this situation astonishing. Why did Light Shadow's destructive power increase by so much? Feng was confused as he looked at the six-eyed gorilla's severed arm. Judging by the damage to its HP, my attack's raw power should still be far from the peak Tier 4 standard. Light Shadow should be just slightly stronger than a Tier 4 spell, yet the actual destruction it caused is no different from that of a peak Tier 4 attack. Could this be due to the ancient Secret Lands environment? Meanwhile, as Feng was analyzing the situation, the one-horned bear rushed toward him. The bear's gigantic frame made it seem as if a small mountain was charging at him. In fact, there was even the vague image of a mountain overlapping with the one-horned bear's figure. Tier 4 skill Crumbling Mountain. The AoE of the one-horned bear's attack covered a 50-yard radius. Feng responded by raising the abyssal blade above his head once more. Light Shadow. When using Light Shadow this time, however, Feng placed the majority of his focus on perceiving the mana around himself. He wanted to see just what was enabling his mana technique to exhibit such immense power. When Feng started swinging the abyssal blade, another pitch-black wall formed on the battlefield, shattered the Phantom Mountain, and subsequently landed on the one-horned bear's left shoulder. Roar! When the pitch-black wall cut into the one-horned bear's shoulder, the bear let loose an agonized howl. Its HP also instantly fell by more than 620,000. Although Shifeng's attack this time did not sever the one-horned bear's left arm, it prevented the bear from freely moving its injured arm. Now the bear could rely on only its 2 legs and 1 arm to stabilize itself. After suffering this grievous injury, the one-horned bear continuously growled at Feng angrily. However, fear was also clear in the bear's eyes. Upon seeing this scene, Floating Light and those of Violet Sword who were retreating were dumbfounded once more. How is this possible? That move just now wasn't a skill? Floating Light felt as if his worldview had been refreshed when he saw the one-horned bear daunted by Feng. In Floating Light's opinion, the attack Feng used to injure the six-eyed gorilla heavily should be a special skill. Otherwise, there was no way the attack could be so powerful. However, only 2 or 3 seconds after Feng retaliated against the six-eyed gorilla, the swordsman was using the same move against the one-horned bear. There was no way such a powerful skill could have such a brief cooldown. The only explanation for this situation was that Feng wasn't using a skill or spell, but a special technique instead. By simply relying on a special technique, Feng was actually capable of heavily injuring mythic monsters. Moreover, these mythic monsters were even the ancient Secret Lands region chiefs. Nobody would believe Floating Light if he told this tale to others. After repelling the one-horned bear, Feng himself was stunned as well. So, this is the reason why the ancient Secret Land can help players reach Tier 4? Feng thought as he looked at the closing spatial tear before him. In God's domain, the greatest difference separating Tier 3 and Tier 4 players wasn't the difference in physique, but the degree of control they had over mana and their application of it. To be precise, it was the degree of control over an application of ambient mana. Controlling and utilizing ambient mana might be something players had started doing since the start of the game, but the standard at which Tier 0 players did it was only at the most basic level. Their efficiency in utilizing mana was extremely low. Hence, players needed to rely on the mana of their fully unlocked mana bodies to guide and utilize the ambient mana for their own use. To put it simply, players had to rely on their own mana bodies to integrate and convert ambient mana into their own mana. By doing so, one would be able to maximize the power they could exhibit with their mana. However, integrating ambient mana was a challenge. Without guidelines or legacies in the outside world to teach players how to accomplish this, players could only rely on themselves to learn how to do so. However, while carefully observing the second light shadow he executed, Feng noticed something peculiar about the mana around him. The ancient Secret Land's ambient mana had actually taken the initiative to integrate itself with his mana. This development had drastically increased the amount of ambient mana he could manipulate and, in turn, boosted the power of Light Shadow significantly. However, as he wasn't actively executing this mana integration, his mana usage efficiency was still very low. The additional ambient mana he managed to manipulate had increased only Light Shadow's destructive power, not the mana technique's strength. This was akin to putting an edge on a weapon. While he might have increased the weapon's destructive power, the weapon itself remained unchanged. Even so, this was an incredibly precious situation. After all, there was almost no information available in the outside world that could help players achieve mana integration. Now that the mana here was actively integrating itself with his mana, he could gain some hints on how to do so and increase his learning efficiency. Following which, Feng stopped dwelling on this matter. Instead, he executed Light Shadow 2 more times to chop off 1 leg each from the one-horned bear and six-eyed gorilla. The mobility of these 2 region chiefs has already been greatly reduced. Let's go. Feng said as he turned to Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who were still in a daze. After saying so, Feng promptly ran toward the ancient city, ignoring the 2 region chiefs. He got through just like that? Crimson Star and Wildfighter were at a loss for words when they goggled at the 2 region chiefs, which were warily watching Feng leave without making a move. They were currently inside the extremely dangerous ancient Secret Land, and their opponents were even 2 region chiefs, and yet. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, Crimson Star and Wildfighter did not linger over this topic for long. They quickly instructed everyone else on the team to ignore the 2 region chiefs and follow Feng. Now that the 2 region chiefs had each lost a leg, their mobility was greatly impeded compared to before. It would be almost impossible for them to catch up with Tier 3 players running at full speed. The team could easily escape the two region chiefs' perception range before they fully recovered. Team leader, are we still chasing them? A Tier 3 ranger from mythology asked Sandstorm when he saw Feng's team leaving. Of course we are. Sandstorm said as he glared at the Tier 3 ranger. Gritting his teeth he said, I admit that Black Flame's combat power is at inhuman levels, but he is only one person. Even if we can't kill Black Flame, I refuse to believe that we can't handle the other players on his team. So long as we get rid of everyone else, Black Flame's plans here will be ruined. After saying so, Sandstorm started chasing Feng's team, together with the other 30+ members of mythology. Chapter 2630, Tier 4 Divine Will. While the ancient secret land might be known as a secret land, it was several times larger than a large-scale map in the outside world, essentially a miniature world. Even though Feng and the others were Tier 3 players, since they were prohibited from using mounts, they ended up running for more than half a day to reach a majestic city in the middle of a canyon. The city in question had several layers of magic barriers as defense. Through the translucent barriers, one could see multiple magic towers and buildings several hundred meters tall. There were even floating buildings that could not be found in any of the kingdoms and empires on the main continent. This city was far more developed than even the capitals of kingdoms and empires. Feng was shocked when he laid eyes on this majestic ancient city for the first time. Even while standing several thousand yards away from the city, he could already feel a frightening pressure constantly bearing down on his body, making his body indescribably heavy. If Tier 2 players were subjected to this pressure, they wouldn't be able to approach the city at all. Be careful of those statues erected behind the city walls. Although there are magic arrays suppressing the power of those statues, if you look at them for too long, you'll fall into a mentally weakened state, Crimson Star warned the curious crowd behind her. If that happens, you'll need 4 or 5 days to recover. Let alone challenging the trial, you might not even have enough time to make it out of the secret land. Those statues will cause players to fall into a mentally weakened state? Upon hearing Crimson Star's words, Feng could not help taking a closer look at the stone statues enveloped by magic arrays. As soon as he did so, he felt a frightening spiritual pressure invading his mind. At the same time, the figure of an ancient being appeared briefly before his mind's eye. Feng's heart palpitated from this mental pressure. Fortunately, his mind was able to resist it, if just barely. Tier 4 Divine Will? Feng was somewhat surprised at the mental pressure the statues were exuding. No wonder Violet Sword was able to produce so many Tier 4 experts back then. At this point, ancient gods had long since withdrawn from the main continent of God's domain. Now, it was incredibly difficult to meet even demigods there. However, before disappearing, many ancient gods had left behind legacies in dangerous locations. Meanwhile, these legacy locations generally possessed divine will. On the surface, the divine wills in these legacy locations function to inflict powerful mental pressure on trespassers and deter casual approach or observation of the legacy locations. However, divine will also had a very useful function for players: the tempering of concentration. In God's domain, players' stamina and concentration were considered hidden attributes and were incredibly difficult to raise. This was especially true for the concentration attribute. Aside from tier promotions, there were no clear methods that players could use to raise their concentration. Originally, concentration was an attribute few players paid attention to, as they would generally run out of stamina before they would concentration. However, as more and more players started learning combat techniques, everyone finally understood the importance of concentration. With stronger concentration, not only could players afford to execute many more combat techniques, but they could also reduce the stamina and concentration consumption of combat techniques. Most importantly, powerful combat techniques required sufficiently high concentration. Unfortunately, there weren't many known methods that players could use to reliably increase their concentration. Generally, players could only rely on raising their tiers or improving their brain activity to do so. However, as more and more experts came into contact with ancient locations and divine will, they had discovered an astonishing matter. Divine will could actually be used to raise the maximum limit of players' concentration. Although the improvements were small, players would eventually receive an impressive boost to their concentration over time. However, divine will wasn't something that easily found. Moreover, divine will couldn't improve a player's concentration in perpetuity. The improvements players could receive from the divine will would differ depending on its strength. If players already possessed very powerful concentration, certain divine wills might not even be effective on them. Meanwhile, the statues erected within the ancient city contain divine will capable of tempering players' concentration up to the Tier 4 standard. Hence, Feng had referred to it as Tier 4 divine will. If a Tier 3 player could elevate their concentration to the Tier 4 standard, it would be of tremendous help when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest. With stronger concentration, players could better control their body, strength, and mana. They would be able to exhibit much greater potential than they used to. However, due to the magic arrays enveloping those statues, the divine will the statues emitted was heavily suppressed. While this weakened divine will might be effective on ordinary Tier 3 players, it would be almost no help to Tier 3 peak experts. Tier 3 peak experts that tried to temper themselves using this divine will would only exhaust their concentration to no avail. Guild leader Black Flame, ahead of us is the entrance to the trial grounds, Crimson Star said as she pointed at a gigantic gate nearby. As we are challenging the hero trial, we have only one opportunity. If we team wipe inside, we won't be able to enter the trial grounds anymore. However, so long as we have even one person alive, even if everyone else on the team dies, we can still enter the trial grounds after getting automatically resurrected outside. Only, the resurrection period within the ancient secret land is very long, 1 full day, so everyone needs to be careful while inside. It might be fine if they were challenging the normal trial, but they had only one opportunity to challenge the hero trial. If the players on their team kept dying, they definitely wouldn't be able to clear the hero trial before the effects of their alchemy arrays ran out. Hence, when challenging the hero trial, controlling the casualty rate was crucial. This was also the reason why she wanted to avoid the region chiefs. Had their team gotten annihilated by the 2 region chiefs back then, they would have had to wait 1 full day before they could head to the trial grounds. I understand, Feng said nodding. Since Feng already understood her intentions, Crimson Star did not say anything more. After all, experts of Feng's caliber generally needed only small reminders to know what they should do. Following which, Crimson Star, Wildfighter, and several other Violet Sword members approached the 10-meter-tall teleportation gate. Each of them then took out an ink-black crystal from their bags and started chanting an incantation. As soon as these dozen or so players started chanting, the divine runes engraved on the teleportation gate lit up and drew the ambient mana toward the teleportation gate. While Crimson Star and the others were activating the hero trial, Sandstorm and Mythology's other members were quietly observing the situation from behind a pile of shattered rocks 500 yards away. The hero trial, the female guardian knight standing beside Sandstorm exclaimed in surprise when she identified the divine runes lighting up on the teleportation gate. Violet Sword actually plans to challenge the hero trial now. Are they insane? She had experienced the ancient city's trials herself. While she didn't know what the hero trial was like, she knew that even the elite trial was not something current players could hope to conquer. If not for their previous raid team having plenty of advanced battle arrays, they wouldn't have made it to the trial boss's feet. As for the more difficult hero trial, that was something even the current mythology didn't dare dream of challenging. The hero trial? When Sandstorm saw Crimson Star's group activating the hero trial, a wide smile bloomed on his face. Good. Wonderful. Although I don't know what gave Violet Swords and Zero Wings people the courage to challenge the hero trial, this is our chance. Since Crimson Star and Wildfighter are personally activating the hero trial, they can't stop midway without wasting their one chance. This is the perfect time for us to take action. But dealing with Black Flame won't be easy, the female guardian knight argued worriedly as she eyed Feng, who was standing beside the teleportation gate. With him around, it'll be difficult for us to gain any advantage. Relax. The vice commander prepared a trump card for our operation this time, Sandstorm said, grinning. He then took out several gleaming gemstones from his bag. These are Tier 3 magic devouring gemstones, which the vice commander obtained from the demon god's shrine. If we equip them on level 100 dark gold weapons or above, we can sacrifice the weapon and the gemstone to gain Tier 4 power for a short period. This item isn't subject to any restrictions inside the ancient secret land. The vice commander gave me 5 of these as a precaution. So long as we 5 team leaders use this gemstone, we'll have 5 Tier 4 combatants on our side. Including the HP and defense we'll gain from the advanced battle array, we should be able to pin down Black Flame with just 3 people. The remaining 2 team leaders will lead the rest to slaughter Violet Swords and Zero Wings members. All their efforts will go down the drain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If you had such treasures on you, why didn't you take them out earlier? The female guardian knight grumbled as she rolled her eyes at Sandstorm. Previously, the task their vice commander gave them was for them to spoil Violet Sword's plan, as well as kill Feng if possible. With the magic devouring gemstones, while they might not be capable of killing Feng, spoiling Violet Sword's plan would be child's play. After all, players that died in the ancient secret land needed to wait one full day to get resurrected. If they could kill a significant number of Violet Swords and Zero Wings members, the two guilds would waste one day of the alchemy array's operational time, which would in turn drastically reduce the two guilds' odds of clearing the hero trial. And if they could interrupt the activation of the teleportation gate, they would thoroughly shatter Violet Sword's plan of raiding the hero trial. "Alright, one for each of you," Sandstorm said as he distributed the magic devouring gemstones to the 4 other team leaders on the team. He then looked toward Feng and said, "It's time we let Black Flame know how foolish it is to offend mythology." Chapter 26:31 Yen Xiaoqian taking action? As Crimson Star and the others chanted their incantation, a spatial tunnel gradually opened in the teleportation gate. The moment the spatial tunnel appeared, everyone present felt an ancient aura spilling out from it as if a dragon from the abyss had just awakened. An unprecedented pressure bore down on their bodies. So this is the hero trial? Feng was inwardly astonished when he felt the pressure on his body. The strength of this aura practically rivals that of a demigod. Even Tier 3 experts will most likely have difficulty exhibiting combat power at the Tier 2 standard while inside. While the pressure an aura subjected players to was not fatal, it would affect their combat power. At this moment, the aura leaking out of the spatial passage was so powerful that it made even Feng feel very uncomfortable. If other Tier 3 players were to fight while subjected to this aura, their combat power would definitely suffer. There are still 40 seconds left until the teleportation gate is fully activated. A mana shockwave will occur when that happens. Floating Light, start constructing a barrier. Crimson Star said through the team chat when she saw the spatial passage stabilizing. Understood. Upon hearing Crimson Star's command, Floating Light promptly ordered Violet Sword's Tier 3 magical classes to construct a Tier 3 defensive barrier. While a mana shockwave wouldn't cause direct damage, players that got hit by one would have their control over and perception of mana weakened significantly for a certain period. Players might even lose the ability to use skills and spells during this time. On Violet Sword's first attempt at the normal trial, the raid team dispatched had failed to take this mana shockwave into account. As a result, the raid team had suffered from a runaway mana state for one whole day. However, as Violet Sword's members were constructing the defensive barrier, a low shout came from a distance. "A chance. Everyone attack. Interrupt the teleportation gate's activation." Sandstorm commanded when he saw Floating Light and the magical class players of Violet Sword constructing a magic barrier. Immediately, several figures charged toward Crimson Star's group with flying speeds. The Silver Light Legion? Crimson Star immediately recognized Sandstorm's group when she saw them, her complexion darkening slightly. Sandstorm. Is mythology trying to break the agreement? If their team had come across Sandstorm's group under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have paid mythology's members any attention at all. However, Violet Sword's peak experts were currently occupied with activating the teleportation gate and defending against the resulting mana shockwave. They barely had any manpower available to repulse Sandstorm's group. Meanwhile, Sandstorm's team consisted of Void Realm experts or better. If these people attacked now, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, Sandstorm and the others had their advanced battle arrays activated, which boosted their basic attributes far beyond those of ordinary Tier 3 players. Agreement. Sandstorm laughed at Crimson Star's words. I don't recall mythology making any agreements with Violet Sword regarding what happens inside the ancient secret land. Besides, if you have to blame someone, blame yourselves for not knowing what's good for you. Since you dare to partner with Zero Wing, then die with it. Sandstorm's team accelerated. Damn it. They're actually taking action. Crimson Star turned to Floating Light and said, Light, coordinate with Guild Leader Black Flame's group and buy us time. If the teleportation gate's activation is interrupted, we'll lose our chance to challenge the hero trial. Understood. Floating Light nodded in response. He then faced Sandstorm's team with a solemn expression. Although their side had an absolute advantage in numbers and they even had the help of a monster like Feng, the number of combat-ready peak experts they had was far from comparable. Not to mention, Sandstorm and a few other individuals on his team had an advanced battle array, which granted them a huge increase in basic attributes. If they allowed Sandstorm's team to break through and interrupt Crimson Star's group, then all their preparations for the hero trial would be for naught. You need to be careful. I don't know why, but Sandstorm and his fellow team leaders are actually giving off a pressure like a mythic monsters. Do not clash with them directly no matter what. Wildfighter reminded, a serious expression similarly appearing on his face. All you need to do is buy time. So long as you can hold them back for 40 seconds or so, we'll be free and can deal with them together. At this time, however, Feng suddenly said, that won't be necessary. Just leave these people to us. Focus on activating the teleportation gate and defending against what comes after. Guild leader Black Flame, we do not doubt your strength, but we really cannot take this risk. The members of Mythology's Silver Light Legion are all supported by a battle array. Their peak experts can hold their own against domain realm experts. Not to mention, Sandstorm and his fellow team leaders are at the half-step domain realm at the very least. The few of them also possess some kind of strange strength. They aren't a force that an ordinary team of peak experts can hope to handle, Crimson Star advised hurriedly when she saw Feng dissuading them from taking part in the battle. Although Floating Light's group only has a few members, every one of them is a peak expert. They can be of some help to you. She was confident that Feng would emerge victorious in a fight with Sandstorm's group. However, their problem right now wasn't whether they could defeat Sandstorm's group but whether they could prevent Sandstorm's group from interrupting the teleportation gate's activation. After all was said and done, Feng was only one person. Since Sandstorm's team had 30 players, how many could Feng possibly hold back by himself? Wildfighter also nodded in agreement with Crimson Star's words. He felt that Feng was being perverse about keeping up appearances. Don't misunderstand. We are fully capable of stopping this level of combat power. If you still feel uneasy, I won't object to you joining the battle, Feng said, chuckling at the anxious expressions on Crimson Star's and Wildfighter's faces. Although Feng did not speak that loudly, everyone present was a Tier 3 expert with extraordinary senses. Hence, even Sandstorm's group, which was still several hundred yards away, heard him clearly. Stop us. Sandstorm laughed at Feng's words, a cold glint appearing in his eyes. Let's see how you'll stop us then. You guys take action. As soon as Sandstorm finished speaking, 6 level 113 and higher assassins suddenly appeared within 50 yards of Crimson Star's group. The masked man at the head of the assassins radiated an aura rivaling that of mythic monsters. This lead assassin moved so quickly that he appeared within 30 yards of Crimson Star in just the blink of an eye. The assassin then unsheathed his daggers and sent several dozen arcs of light tearing through space toward Crimson Star and the dozen or so other players activating the teleportation gate. What? Some of them actually snuck over already? Floating Light's complexion paled upon seeing these 6 assassins. It was simply impossible for them to stop such a sudden and widespread attack. Even Feng would most likely be able to stop only a portion of these attacks. After all, Crimson Star and the others activating the teleportation gate stood a distance from each other. It was impossible for a melee player like Feng to cover all that ground simultaneously. Just when the several dozen arcs of light were about to land on Crimson Star and the others, however, ice walls started appearing out of thin air one after another, separating Crimson Star's group from the light arcs. Meanwhile, when these powerful light arcs, which were capable of tearing apart even space itself, landed on the ice walls, it was as if they had crashed into an impenetrable wall. Not only did the ice walls stop the advance of these light arcs, but they even deflected the attacks to a certain extent. In the end, not even one of the several dozen light arcs managed to land on their target. Impossible. My attack actually got deflected by a bunch of Tier 2 ice walls? The eyes of the level 114 Tier 4 assassin in the lead nearly fell out of their sockets when he saw this scene. Currently, thanks to the magic devouring gemstone, his Tier 3 skill already carried power at the Tier 4 standard, something a few measly Tier 2 ice walls couldn't hope to deflect. In fact, the Tier 2 ice walls shouldn't even be capable of affecting his attack at all. However, the impossible had actually happened. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You, who took action? Sandstorm was likewise stunned by this scene. He then turned to Crimson Star and wondered, could it be her? At this moment, Sandstorm truly could not think of any elementalist, aside from Crimson Star, who could use Tier 2 ice walls to deflect Tier 4 attacks. On the other hand, Crimson Star was currently activating the teleportation gate. Logically, she shouldn't have any leeway to do anything else. Crimson Star herself was astonished by this situation. However, compared to a melee player like Sandstorm, she, as an elementalist, was much more sensitive to mana. Hence, she was able to trace the origin of the ice walls immediately. Xiaoqian? When Crimson Star turned to look at the origin of the ice walls, however, she was stunned when her gaze landed on Yan Xiaoqian. Currently, Ice-type mana swirled around Yan Xiaoqian, a testament to the activation of an Ice-type spell. Since when was she this strong? Chapter 2632, Silenced Battlefield. Upon seeing Yan Xiaoqian take action, Violet Sword's members fell silent. Yan Xiaoqian had attracted a lot of attention when she participated in the training for young talents in Violet Sword. One of the reasons for this was that she was only half a step away from entering the domain realm. The other reason was Instructor Tori's willingness to teach her. Hence, most of Violet Sword's upper echelon and peak experts had done their research on her and knew what kind of strength she possessed. However, the current Yan Xiaoqian was like a completely different person from the one they knew. She had single-handedly stopped the attack of a peak expert whose basic attributes were at the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, this Tier 3 assassin expert was also clearly only half a step away from the domain realm. Of the Violet Sword members present, even domain realm experts like Crimson Star and Wildfighter might not be able to stop the assassin's attacks completely, yet Yan Xiaoqian had. Naturally, this surprised Violet Sword's members. Her mana body is fully unlocked? Wildfighter, who stood relatively close to Yan Xiaoqian, revealed astonishment on his face when he sensed intense mana fluctuations from her. Her mana body was only at a little more than 50% potential 3 days ago. What did Zero Wing do? Upon hearing Wildfighter's words, realization dawned upon the other Violet Sword members present, and every one of them stared at Yan Xiaoqian in even greater astonishment. This was especially true for Floating Light, who had trained under Instructor Tori together with her. How is this possible? This is the mana body we are talking about. How can she fully unlock it in just 3 days? Floating Light's eyes widened in shock as he gaped at Yan Xiaoqian. For a moment, he felt as if he was looking at a stranger. When it came to talent in combat, he was superior to Yan Xiaoqian. In addition, after he had trained in the ancient Secret Land Special Training Ground, his combat power was now recognized as almost equal to Solitary Frost's. In theory, he should be far superior to Yan Xiaoqian. Now, however, it turned out that Yan Xiaoqian's combat power actually surpassed his by a large margin. However, before Violet Sword's members could react to this unexpected development, Mythology's lead assassin made another move. This time, though, he dashed forward at great speed instead of launching a ranged attack. In no time at all, the lead assassin arrived within 10 yards of Crimson Star's group, this situation causing the expressions of Crimson Star and the others to darken. The assassin class wasn't known for its ranged attacks. The class truly shone in close combat. This was especially true for the explosive power the class could exhibit at melee range. Moreover, with the agility of the assassin class, trying to pin one down using ranged spells was extremely difficult, all the more an assassin with Tier 4 basic attributes. That little girl's defensive measures might be brilliant, but at this distance, I want to see how she'll stop my attacks, the lead assassin said as he got within 5 yards of Wildfighter. Tier 3 skill, Absolute Shadow Assault. Immediately, the assassin's body split into multiple shadows to assail Wildfighter, these shadows causing the surrounding space to crack as they approached the Berserker. These shadows were so powerful that even Guardian Knights and Shield Warriors would die instantly if struck, let alone a Berserker like Wildfighter. It's over. Upon seeing the rapidly approaching shadows, Wildfighter involuntarily shut his eyes. As he was currently activating the teleportation gate, he couldn't afford to defend against the attack at all. Doing so would cancel the process. Moreover, even if he weren't occupied with the gate's activation, he still wouldn't be able to get away unscathed from such a powerful attack. After all, not only did these shadows carry power at the Tier 4 standard, but they were also strengthened by a basic combat technique. Just as the several shadows were about to devour Wildfighter, however, a figure suddenly descended from above and transformed into 4 identical copies of themselves, which then struck at the assaulting shadows. The clangor of weapons repeatedly echoed throughout the area before the teleportation gate. Multiple cracks extending up to 30 yards away appeared on the ground. The frightening shockwaves resulting from the clashes almost toppled the nearby peak experts. When the dust settled, a male youth wielding a great sword appeared, standing quietly before the lead assassin from Mythology. Since the youth's HP bar remained full, it was obvious that he had successfully fended off the lead assassin's attack. Solitary Frost? Wildfighter could not help doubting his eyes when he saw the youth shielding him. Even in his peak state, Wildfighter doubted he could perfectly defend against the lead assassin's attack. However, not only did Solitary Frost remain unscathed after repelling the lead assassin's attack, but the youth had also kept Wildfighter from coming to harm. The combat power Solitary Frost had just displayed was completely different from what Wildfighter remembered. He fully unlocked his mana body as well? When Crimson Star saw that Solitary Frost was similarly exuding a frightening amount of mana from his body, astonishment and confusion appeared in her eyes. In the case of Xiaoqian, Crimson Star still found it understandable for the girl to unlock her mana body to 100% potential in just 3 short days. After all, Xiaoqian was a magical class player. She boasted far better mana control than melee experts like Solitary Frost. She had much better odds of unlocking the mana body. Now, however, Solitary Frost had actually fully unlocked his mana body too. Since when did unlocking the mana body become so easy? While Crimson Star stewed in shock and confusion, Mythology's assassin leader, whose attacks got thwarted twice in a row, was extremely depressed. First it was Xiaoqian. Now it was Solitary Frost. He was clearly just one step away from foiling Violet Sword's plans, yet he got blocked time and again. Sandstorm, my side is in trouble. The kid I'm up against has already fully unlocked his mana body. His combat standard is also very high. He's not the slightest bit weaker than Wildfighter. If he focuses on deflecting my attacks, I don't think I can do anything to the casters within a short period. If Black Flame joins in on the fight, I'm afraid I won't even be able to escape, the lead assassin reported to Sandstorm through the team chat. Since the ambush has failed, retreat and regroup with us first. We'll focus on killing off as many of Zero Wings and Azure's members as possible, Sandstorm ordered, gritting his teeth when he saw Feng holding off the remaining 5 members of the assassin party. After saying so, Sandstorm hastened his footsteps. Previously, the main group of Mythology's team had deliberately exposed themselves to hold the attention of Feng and the other Zero Wing members with fully unlocked mana bodies so that the assassin party would succeed in its ambush. However, Azure turned out to have monsters with fully unlocked mana bodies as well. This unexpected development had thrown a wrench into Sandstorm's original plans. Everyone charge. No need to hold back anymore. We'll get rid of them together with the assassin party. Sandstorm shouted as he pointed at Zero Wings members. Upon seeing Sandstorm's team rushing toward Zero Wings and Azure's members, Crimson Star and Wildfighter could not help growing anxious. Guild leader Black Flame, we must not let that Tier 3 assassin regroup with Sandstorm's group. Team leaders like him can enter a battle array with each other. If we let him regroup with the main team, those team leaders will become even stronger. Crimson Star warned when she saw Mythology's assassin leader retreating at flying speeds. Relax. Even if they regroup, they have no chance of victory, Feng assured her, smiling. Even after seeing Mythology's assassin party retreating, he showed no intention of giving chase. But Crimson Star fell speechless when she saw Feng's nonchalant attitude toward Mythology. She knew that Zero Wing had sent over 100 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies this time. These experts undoubtedly possessed astonishing combat power. However, the 30-plus members of Mythology's Silverlight Legion were no pushovers either. With the assistance of a battle array, even those that hadn't fully unlocked their mana bodies could still exhibit combat power rivaling that of experts with fully unlocked mana bodies. In addition, every one of Mythology's members present was a bona fide peak expert or better. If the two sides clashed with each other, Zero Wing definitely wouldn't have an easy time. Good. Flowing Shadows party is almost back. Everyone get ready. It's time we let Zero Wing and Azure know the power of Mythology. Sandstorm said to the 3 other team leaders when he saw the assassin party within 100 yards of the main team. Leave it to us. Once we activate our battle array, even Black Flame shouldn't think of making short work of us, the female guardian knight standing beside Sandstorm said, nodding. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, just as Mythology's assassin party was about to rejoin Sandstorm's group, Feng glanced at Aqua Rose, who stood beside him. In response, Aqua Rose nodded and said calmly, everyone, no need to continue hiding. Let these people know our true power. As soon as Aqua Rose finished speaking, Zero Wing's members promptly removed their black cloaks. A tsunami of mana immediately flooded the area outside the ancient city. A powerful aura also swept across everyone on the battlefield, stopping Mythology's members in their tracks. And upon seeing the statistics of Zero Wing's members, Mythology's members could not help being dumbfounded. Currently, Every Zero-Wing member before them not only possessed a fully unlocked mana body but was also at level 117 or level 118. Zero-Wing's melee players were especially eye-catching as every one of them actually boasted dark gold set equipment. Chapter 2633, Monsters, those levels? How is this possible? Are they monsters? At this moment, let alone Mythology's members, even Violet Sword's members were stunned to see the levels of Zero-Wing's members. Currently, even the peak experts of the various superpowers had reached only level 113 or level 114. However, even the lowest leveled Zero-Wing member present was at level 117, far ahead of the superpowers' peak experts. Team leader Sandstorm, all of them have fully unlocked their mana bodies. Moreover, their equipment standards are quite high, especially for those melee players. I'm afraid we'll need a lot of time and resources to kill them. If Violet Sword's side manages to free up some manpower in the meantime, we'll be in danger, a Tier 3 Berserker from Mythology warned Sandstorm as he looked at the 100-plus Zero-Wing members before them. Although the team leaders on their team had all fully unlocked their mana bodies, no one else on the team had. They only had the assistance of a battle array. However, even if they possessed superior basic attributes to Zero-Wing's members, they definitely wouldn't be superior by much, judging by the equipment standard of Zero-Wing's members. If it came down to a fight, they wouldn't have much of an advantage even in a one-on-one fight. Not to mention their team only had 30-odd members, whereas Zero-Wing's side had more than 100 players. Overall, they were at a complete disadvantage. Damn it. You guys retreat. Sandstorm ordered, his complexion darkening as he gazed at Zero-Wing's members. He then turned to the female guardian knight beside him and said, "Feather, you and the other team leaders continue fighting. We'll kill as many as we can. Retreat as soon as Crimson Star's group finishes activating the teleportation gate." "Got it," replied the female guardian knight named White Feather, unopposed to Sandstorm's decision. Team leaders like herself and Sandstorm currently possessed power at the Tier 4 standard. With the assistance of the battle array, their basic attributes were far superior to those of Zero-Wing's members. Out of the Zero-Wing members present, only Feng could actually put them in a bind. However, if the 5 of them split up and took action independently, they could slaughter quite a few of Zero-Wing's members. Moreover, they had already used the precious magic devouring gemstones for the operation. If they still failed to produce any results, they would definitely be punished. Obedient to Sandstorm's command, everyone from Mythology aside from the 5 team leaders, promptly turned around and fled. However, as soon as Mythology's members took flight, a clear and crisp voice entered everyone's ears. "Don't even think of getting away so easily." In the next moment, a magic array rapidly spread out from beneath Xiaoqian's feet, summoning a barrier of flames. Covering a 500-yard radius around Xiaoqian, the barrier trapped all of Mythology's members within it. "Bastard!" Sandstorm bellowed in rage when he saw the barrier of flames rise. He immediately charged straight at Xiaoqian, his movement speed astonishing Violet Sword's members. Sandstorm was at least twice as fast as the assassin leader that attacked Crimson Star's group earlier. In the blink of an eye, he appeared over 50 yards from his original location. Everyone be careful. He's already capable of perfectly integrating advanced footwork into his movement skill. Do not clash with him directly. Wildfighter warned, a grim expression appearing on his face at Sandstorm's astonishing speed. Among the various types of combat techniques available, the most difficult type to integrate with skills and spells was footwork. Integrating footwork with a movement skill was especially challenging. Even in Violet Sword, only a few individuals were capable of this. Anyone who achieved this integration could freely weave their way through an army of tens of thousands. Not to mention, Sandstorm's basic attributes were currently at the Tier 4 standard. With the combination of his speed and strength, he was basically unstoppable. In just 3 seconds, Sandstorm penetrated Zero-Wing's defensive line and arrived behind Xiaoqian. He then executed a downward slash at the elementalist's back using the silver shortsword he wielded. "Die, you hindrance!" Sandstorm bellowed. Immediately, mana gathered around his shortsword and coalesced into a great sword that left a dark void in its wake. Just when the great sword was about to land on Xiaoqian, however, a lithe figure suddenly appeared beside the elementalist and sent a sword light cutting at the greatsword. Boom! A loud explosion shook the battlefield, and the space surrounding the point of collision shattered into oblivion. The resulting shockwave sent all the players within a 10-yard radius of the explosion's epicenter flying. Impossible. She blocked it? White Feather, who was watching from a distance, doubted her eyes when she saw Gentle Snow stopping Sandstorm's attack. Although Sandstorm was an assassin, he had been drastically strengthened by the magic devouring gemstone and the advanced battle array. His current strength far exceeded that of ordinary mythic monsters of the same level. With the boost in power his Tier 3 skill provided, his attack should be capable of repulsing even bona fide mythic monsters. However, despite being merely a Tier 3 player, Gentle Snow had actually managed to receive the attack without losing any ground. A special skill? Sandstorm muttered. Although he was similarly surprised that Gentle Snow stopped his attack, he quickly realized the reason why she was able to do so. I don't know what skill you used to stop my attack, but since it is a skill and not a combat technique, you'll only be able to stop me once. I refuse to believe you can continue stopping me. After saying so, Sandstorm readied himself to launch another attack. However, as if Gentle Snow had long anticipated this, she intercepted him, executing 4 attacks with her greatsword. Will of Light. 4 extreme slashes. Boom, 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 boom. Sandstorm quickly responded to Gentle Snow's intervention, rapidly brandishing his short sword to defend against the 4 slashes. Every attack he blocked sent him stumbling 1 step back. Are you done using your skill yet? Although Sandstorm was forced to retreat by 4 steps, he still maintained a calm expression. He then smirked and said, "If you're done, it's my turn now." However, just as Sandstorm finished speaking, Gentle Snow raised Glorious Will above her head. At the same time, her body started releasing a sacred glow that suppressed even the space around her. Disappear. Gentle Snow shouted as she swung Glorious Will down at Sandstorm. A boundless light devoured Sandstorm. Myth of Light. With just 1 attack, Gentle Snow obliterated everything before her within 100 yards. Even space itself shattered. As for Sandstorm, he went flying over 100 yards away, his HP falling below 50% and his body covered in injuries. When he hit the ground, the impact created a huge crater. Upon seeing this scene, everyone present was astonished. Violet Swords and Mythology's members in particular, could not help gaping in shock. Just how many cards does Zero Wing have hidden? Crimson Star wondered aloud as she stared at Gentle Snow. First it was Feng. Now it was Gentle Snow. Gentle Snow was clearly only at the Void Realm standard. In terms of basic attributes, she had to be quite inferior to Sandstorm. Moreover, Sandstorm had also fully unlocked his mana body already. The only advantage she had was her level of 118. No matter how Crimson Star looked at it, Gentle Snow shouldn't be a match for Sandstorm. In the end, however, Gentle Snow had used only a few moves to topple Sandstorm. The power of her final attack in particular, practically rivaled that of the attack Feng used to deal with the 2 region chiefs. Feather, what should we do? Sandstorm is already heavily injured. There's still Sinful Flame on Azure's side. With just the 4 of us, I'm afraid we'll have difficulty accomplishing anything. The Tier 3 Elementalist standing beside White Feather asked when he saw Sandstorm struggling even to stand up right now. With the situation as it was, they wouldn't gain anything from continuing this fight. Out of the 5 team leaders taking part in this operation, Sandstorm was the strongest while White Feather came second. Now that Sandstorm was heavily injured and occupied in battle, it was up to White Feather to take charge. We retreat. Zero Wing's strength exceeds our expectations. We need to report this matter to the Vice Commander as soon as possible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But what about the fire barrier? The Tier 3 Elementalist asked as he looked at the barrier of flames surrounding them. If I use my trump card, I should be able to shatter it. Once it's gone, have everyone retreat at full speed. White Feather instructed. All right. I'll have them scatter and run, the Tier 3 Elementalist said, nodding. Following which, White Feather shattered Xiaoqian's barrier of flames with a single move. She and Mythology's other members then scattered and fled. As for Zero Wing's members, they persistently hunted down Mythology's members. In the end, they killed not only 20+ of Mythology's peak experts but also Sandstorm and 2 other team leaders, inflicting severe losses on Mythology's Silver Light Legion. Word of this battle also quickly spread throughout Violet Light City, shaking all those who heard it. Chapter 2634, Fame spreads across the Western continent. The Silver Light Legion was Mythology's strongest trump card legion. It might not have many members, but every member had astonishing combat power. Moreover, the peak experts of the legion all possessed the assistance of a battle array. All this time, the Silver Light Legion had been in existence the various superpowers dreaded. Meanwhile, although Violet Light City was a guild city jointly established by Violet Sword and Mythology, as many superpowers were partners with these super guilds, there were plenty of members of other superpowers present in the city. Word of Sandstorm's team suffering a tragic defeat triggered heated debates among the various superpowers members resting within Violet Light City. Some could not help doubting the validity of this information. In their opinion, Mythology's Silver Light Legion was basically an invincible existence. At this stage of the game, no matter how strong a team of players became, it would, at best, be the Silver Light Legion's equal. The utter rout brooded about was definitely impossible for the Silver Light Legion. How could a pseudo-superpower like Zero Wing have a team capable of defeating the Silver Light Legion? While the various superpowers operating in Violet Light City were looking into this matter, White Feather and the other survivors of Sandstorm's team were currently standing inside a meeting room in Mythology's residence and reporting about it to the white-haired youth before them. White Feather and the others gazed at this white-haired youth with reverence in their eyes. This was because this white-haired youth was none other than the Silver Light Legion's vice commander, Prosciutto, nicknamed the Silver Ghost. You're saying Zero Wing has over 100 members with fully unlocked mana bodies? The Silver Ghost asked calmly as he looked at White Feather. MHM. In addition, according to our investigations, before Azure's Solitary Frost and Yen Xiaoqian underwent Zero Wing's special training, both of them were still quite some distance away from fully unlocking their mana bodies. Now, however, both of them have already done so, and they now rival Crimson Star and Wildfighter in combat power, White Feather replied seriously while nodding. It seems Zero Wing has quite a lot of secrets, Prosciutto commented as he entered deep thought. Vice Commander, they activated the teleportation gate not long ago. Why don't I organize another team and wait for them to come out? Previously we lost mainly because we were outnumbered. If we have more people in the team, Zero Wing won't have much of an advantage over us, White Feather suggested. Now that news of the Silver Light Legion's defeat had spread, they would definitely become a laughingstock among the superpowers if they could not take care of Zero Wing in short order. That won't be necessary, Prosciutto said. Chuckling, he continued, since Zero Wing wants to become famous, we'll fulfill their wish. Notify the ones below and have them publicize this information. I believe plenty of superpowers and major corporations will be interested in Zero Wing's secret for unlocking the mana body. Vice Commander, although the other superpowers will definitely be interested in this secret, if we don't make a move ourselves, I'm afraid no superpower will be willing to take action against Zero Wing. In the end, everyone will simply sit back and watch Zero Wing develop, White Feather said worriedly. Relax. Soon we'll be done with the task the demon god assigned us. At that time, the kingdoms and empires on the continent will no longer serve as a protective shield for the various powers. Meanwhile, with how much resources Zero Wing is occupying, it will become the common target of the superpowers. We won't need to make a move at all, Prosciutto said, smiling. That quest is almost complete? White Feather's eyes glowed with excitement when she heard Prosciutto's words. There were 2 crucial quests available in the demon god's shrine, and the completion of either of them could kick up a storm throughout the western continent. Mythology had chosen to challenge one of those quests. Originally, though, she thought that they would need a lot more time to complete it. If they really completed that quest, then even if Zero Wing cleared the Ancient Secret Lands hero trial, it would be meaningless. The only outcome awaiting Zero Wing would be destruction. Alright, go make the necessary preparations to publicize Zero Wing's information. Also, send someone to the eastern continent to notify Vice Guild leader Cold Shadow about the quest's progress. She should know how to deal with Zero Wing, Prosciutto commanded. Understood. White Feather replied before leaving the meeting room. News of Zero Wing having over 100 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies spread across the entire western continent, instantly garnering great fame for Zero Wing. At the same time, though, the western continent's powers also grew jealous of Zero Wing and started coveting its secrets. The guild immediately became the focal point of the western continent as the various powers began investigating it. As Zero Wing's fame was spreading across the western continent, Crimson Star was leading Feng and the others into the hero trial. After everyone walked through the teleportation gate and arrived inside the trial grounds, they immediately fell silent. An indescribably solemn expression also appeared on their faces. The reason for this was the intense gravity in the trial grounds. The moment they entered, it felt as if several hundred kilograms had been added to their bodies. Now, let alone fighting, even walking normally was a challenge. In addition, the tunnel they were currently standing in was incomparably dark, which hampered their vision greatly. In fact, aside from their sense of sight, the rest of their five senses were also significantly blunted. Now, they felt as if the standard of their five senses wasn't even on par with the five senses of Tier 1 players. The worst part of it all was the tens of thousands of humanoid monsters ahead of them. Aside from being fully geared in armor, these humanoid monsters also held long swords and carried longbows on their backs. Looking at this scene, everyone could not help feeling that they had just entered an ancient battlefield. Trial Warrior, Dark Creature, Great Lord, Level 120 HP 100, 000, 000/100, 000, Trial Elite, Dark Creature, Grand Lord, Level 121 HP 430, 000, 000/430, 000, 000. However, before everyone could digest the information before them, the sound of system notifications entered their ears. System, you have discovered the hero trial space. System, hero trial activated. You have 5 natural days to complete the trial. You will be awarded based on the trial's completion rate. 5 days. How can we possibly get through so many monsters in just 5 days? Floating Light suspected that the system was toying with them when he stared at the endless trial warriors and trial elites before him. The monsters in this trial space were ordinary monsters, which normally wouldn't pose much of a threat to the experts on their team. However, that was in the outside world. Inside the trial space, their physical bodies and 5 senses were heavily suppressed. Even a domain realm expert like himself could barely exhibit 30% of his normal combat power under such a suppression. At this moment he would have great trouble fighting the trial warriors in a one-on-one situation, let alone the trial elites. Meanwhile, there was only one path in this trial space, so there was no way they could avoid the trial warriors and trial elites entirely. The only way to get to the trial boss was to kill these monsters and gradually carve out a path. Meanwhile, when Crimson Star and Wildfighter, who had started growing optimistic of success after witnessing Zero Wing's strength, saw this scene, they were likewise stunned. Not only are the monsters here numerous, but they are also positioned very close together. Even if we lure just one of them, I'm afraid we'll end up luring several thousand. In addition, all of these monsters are capable of ranged attacks. Let alone fighting, even dodging their attacks would be a problem. Wildfighter frowned at the trial warriors and trial elites that filled the tunnel before him. Although he had long known that the hero trial would be difficult, he never thought that it would be this difficult. With their bodies so heavily suppressed, if they tried fighting several thousand of these monsters simultaneously, they would definitely be honeycombed in no time. Look closer, the weapons of those monsters are enchanted with a penetrating effect. Not to mention other melee players, even MTs won't be able to tank more than a handful of those monsters. The slightest mistake would mean death. Although I have some spells that can stop a portion of the ranged attacks, there are simply too many monsters. The help I can provide will be negligible, Crimson Star said, a bitter smile forming on her face as she pointed at the trial elite's weapons. Our only option is to have our ranged players kite the monsters and whittle away their numbers. However, if we do that, killing all these monsters in just 5 days will be utterly impossible. Upon hearing Crimson Star's words, Duan Hans Han and the other experts from the Azure Chamber of Commerce also nodded in agreement. Any melee expert that hadn't reached the Void Realm would get slaughtered if they tried going up against more than a handful of these trial monsters by themselves. However, their team simply had too few peak experts. They couldn't form a frontline capable of effectively holding off the trial monsters. Their only option was to have the ranged players kite the monsters and have the melee players repel any monsters that got too close for comfort. However, while this strategy was very safe, the efficiency was abysmal. Vice Commander Crimson, you say can block a portion of the ranged attacks? Feng asked after giving the matter some thought. Yes. I can block roughly 20% to 30% of the ranged attacks. However, there are simply too many monsters here. Against the attacks of several thousand monsters, even if I manage to block 30%, it will do little to no good for those dodging the attacks, Crimson Star said, nodding. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If you can block that much, then there shouldn't be any problem, Feng said after making some mental calculations. Afterward, my side will stand at the front and attract the monsters' attacks. Everyone else just has to attack with everything you've got. We should be able to get to the trial boss within the stipulated time. You'll attract the attacks? Crimson Star was stunned by Feng's words. She simply couldn't understand why Feng didn't consider this a problem. These were the simultaneous attacks of several thousand monsters they were talking about. Moreover, some of these monsters even had weapons with enhanced penetrative effects. Not to mention, in this horrible environment, even peak experts would have difficulty evading the attacks of the trial monsters, let alone Zero Wings members who were mainly at the refinement realm standard. However, before Crimson Star and the others could react to Feng's proposal, the swordsman had already commanded Zero Wings 100+ experts to take action. And these Zero Wing members immediately charged at the nearby trial warriors and trial elites without the slightest bit of hesitation. Chapter 2635, A Stroll Through the Backyard? Upon seeing Zero Wings members dash straight toward the nearest group of trial monsters, Violet Swords and Azure's members gaped in shock. They were going up against several thousand monsters here. Moreover, even the weakest of these monsters was a level 120 Great Lord, yet Feng didn't even bother to discuss positioning and individual assignments before having Zero Wings members charge straight into battle. This was the first time Violet Swords and Azure's members had seen such leadership. To make matters worse, every one of Zero Wings members actually obeyed Feng's command. This is just too reckless. Wildfighter could not help feeling anxious when he saw Feng proceeding with utter disregard for their opinions. There are several thousand monsters. Even if they have fully unlocked mana bodies and can take some hits, if they can't dodge attacks they'll still end up dead. He admitted that Zero Wings members were very high-leveled. In addition, every one of them also had a fully unlocked mana body. Zero Wings members definitely had a greater advantage when going up against the trial monsters than Violet Sword's peak experts did. However, the system was clearly trying to test players' combat standards in this tunnel. Levels and fully unlocked mana bodies were only secondary. Currently, they were already tight for time because the trial duration was only 5 days instead of the expected 7 days. If they died here and lost a day's worth of progress, they definitely wouldn't be able to complete the trial. We have no choice but to go along with them, Crimson Star sighed when she saw Zero Wings members getting close to the nearest group of trial monsters. I'll activate my magic array in a moment. Everyone else, focus fire on the trial elites. So long as we reduce the number of penetrating attacks we have to deal with, we can stop the remaining trial monsters much more easily. Sinful Flame and the other members of Azure nodded in agreement with Crimson Star's plan before charging toward the nearest trial elite. They intended to get rid of a few trial elites as soon as the battle between both sides started, so that they could lessen the pressure on Zero Wings members and minimize casualties. The instant Zero Wings members entered the trial monsters' perception range, the trial warriors and trial elites promptly sprang into action like veterans of the battlefield. In no time at all, 400 trial warriors spread out into a square formation around the main army. They then stabbed the iron shields they carried into the ground, creating an iron wall that protected the several thousand other trial monsters within their formation. As for the trial monsters inside the square formation, they unslung their bows, split up into several divisions, and fired arrows at Zero Wings members in intervals. This scene stunned Violet Swords and Azure's members momentarily. They had seen monsters attacking as an orderly group before, but this was definitely their first time seeing monsters attacking in such a well-trained fashion. In fact, the coordination of these trial monsters rivaled that of NPCs. Volleys of arrows rained down on Zero Wings members, each volley consisting of more than 1,000 arrows. Moreover, the intervals between the volleys were incredibly short. The arrows in each volley were also well-spaced, leaving no room for Zero Wings members to exploit. It's over. Even peak experts will have difficulty dodging and blocking all those arrows. With the combat standards of Zero Wings members, several volleys would be enough to annihilate them. Wildfighter's complexion darkened significantly when he saw the spate of arrows bombarding Zero Wings members. Against such a coordinated and accurate assault, let alone Zero Wings members, even a group of peak experts wouldn't survive for very long. Although the attack pattern was very monotonous, the arrows flew incredibly fast. In addition, they came in torrents. There was a limit to the number of actions and reactions a person could make within a certain period. Over this limit, even domain realm experts would be rendered powerless and could only watch as they got killed. Although these arrows didn't carry a lot of power, they still weren't attacks players like themselves could afford to receive casually. At this moment, every one of Zero Wings members would have to go up against at least 10 arrows simultaneously, with some unlucky ones having to go up against as many as 20. After factoring in the speed of the arrows, these numbers had already exceeded the limits of even Tier 3 peak experts. Only domain realm experts would be able to accurately determine the trajectories of these arrows and react to them in time. Just when the first volley of arrows was about to land on Zero Wings members, a voice appeared in the team chat. Vice Commander Crimson, activate your defensive magic array. Feng ordered unhurriedly as he looked at the descending arrows. Got it? Upon hearing Feng's command, Crimson Star snapped out of her daze and waved her staff, completing the activation of the magic array she had prepared beforehand. A silver barrier bloomed from the center of Zero Wings formation, instantly expanding to cover a 200-yard radius and enveloping all of Zero Wings members within it. Tier 3 Curse Aerial Defense. Aerial Defense was a curse that had a certain probability of invalidating the flying tools within its range. It was similarly effective against arrows. In the next moment, more than 20% of the first arrow volley clattered to the ground. Now, only about 900 arrows continued flying toward Zero Wings members. Even so, Violet Swords and Azure's members still wore grim expressions on their faces. Although the number of arrows had been reduced to around 900, the number of attacks each of Zero Wings members had to face still exceeded the limit of peak experts, let alone refinement realm experts. As Violet Swords and Azure's members were shaking their heads and sighing, Zero Wings members started maneuvering around the arrows, dodging them effortlessly as if they had long since known the trajectories of these arrows. From afar, it seemed as if Zero Wings members were dancing in a rain of arrows. When the first volley of arrows ended, not a single Zero Wing member had suffered a direct hit. While some Zero Wing members had lost roughly a quarter of their HP, that was merely a result of them defending against the Trial Elite's penetrating arrows. The HP they lost was also instantly replenished by the healers on the team. How is that possible? Floating Light's eyes bulged when he saw this scene. Against that volley of arrows, even he wouldn't have such an easy time blocking and defending. However, Zero Wings members had dealt with the volley of arrows as if they were just strolling through their backyard. At this moment, let alone Floating Light, even Solitary Frost and Xiaoqian, who had trained with Zero Wings members for the past few days, were astonished by this scene. Despite the majority of Zero Wings members being only at the refinement realm, they had easily dealt with an attack that even peak experts would find troublesome. This was simply unbelievable. They can actually block and dodge that kind of attack so easily? Just what kind of training do they normally undergo? Xiaoqian's heart roiled with confusion as she looked at Zero Wings refinement realm experts. What Xiaoqian and the others did not know was that Zero Wings core members had long since familiarized themselves with attacks like the Trial Monster's arrow attacks. After all, they faced much worse when they were training at the Extraordinary Tower's first floor. In fact, in the opinions of Zero Wings members, blocking and dodging the Trial Monster's arrow attacks would still be a cakewalk even without Crimson Star's support. After enduring several volleys of arrows, Feng noticed that all of the agitated Trial Monsters had shifted their attention to Zero Wings members. He then ordered through the team chat, "We've stabilized the aggro. Everyone start attacking." Upon hearing Feng's command, Violet Swords and Azure's members snapped out of their daze and started launching attacks at the Trial Monsters, together with Zero Wings members. Because Zero Wings members were holding aggro, everyone else could attack freely without having to worry about getting attacked themselves. As a result, the Trial Monsters fell rapidly one after another. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, everyone discovered that these Trial Monsters granted a surprisingly large amount of EXP, basically 3 times higher than normal. At this discovery, Violet Swords and Azure's members grew ecstatic. The only disappointing thing about these Trial Monsters was that they did not drop any loot. After the team grinded the Trial Monsters for more than half a day, something strange occurred. One of the Trial Elites killed suddenly burst into flames and transformed into a dilapidated crystal steel that hovered quietly in the air. The steel radiated frightening mana fluctuations that sent many of the Tier 3 experts present stumbling back. An ancient legacy steel. When Feng saw this worn steel, his eyes widened in shock, and he could not help wondering whether he was hallucinating. Chapter 2636, Beginning of Chaos. Feng aside, the sudden appearance of the crystal steel surprised everyone else present and piqued their curiosity. They never thought that the Trial Monsters, which had not dropped a single item until now, would actually drop a steel. What an amazing steel. It's causing the ambient mana density to skyrocket just by hovering there. Even the surrounding space has become heavier. Crimson Star exclaimed when she registered the changes the crystal steel brought to its environs. If a Tier 2 player were here, they wouldn't even be able to approach it. In regard to this situation, though, Violet Sword's members could not help a little disappointment. Even a fool could tell that the crystal steel was extraordinary. However, according to the agreement between Zero Wing and Violet Sword, aside from the trial boss's loot, every other discovery made and loot found in the trial would belong to Zero Wing. Hence they could only look at the steel. What is this steel? Not only can it not be appraised, but you can't even touch it. It's as if this steel doesn't exist in this space, Aqua Rose said with a gloomy expression on her face as she stood before the steel. Could it be a holographic projection? This crystal steel was incredibly precious. Even if they couldn't appraise it and discover its uses, they could still set it up inside a room to increase the room's mana density. This room could then be used as a training facility for players. However, if this treasure was merely a hologram, then it can't even serve as a decoration. This isn't a hologram. It's just that we can't touch it, Feng said, smiling. Guild leader, you're still in the mood for jokes? If we can't touch it, then we can only look at this steel and nothing more, Aqua Rose said anxiously when she saw Feng's nonchalant attitude toward this situation. In God's domain, the prerequisite for players to store an item in their bag space was for them to come into physical contact with the target item. If they couldn't touch the steel, how were they supposed to take it away? Looking at it is indeed our only option, Feng said, nodding while smiling. This steel isn't an item that can be taken away. The only thing we can take away is the information recorded on it. The existence of ancient legacy steels was still foreign to the current players of God's domain because these steels appeared only in ancient ruins or secret lands. In the past, the discovery of an ancient legacy steel would always trigger a storm of bloodshed. This was because ancient legacy steels recorded the lost technology of ancient civilization. Any guild that managed to get their hands on this technology could undergo a qualitative transformation. In Feng's previous life, a total of 5 ancient legacy steels had appeared in God's domain. During the 10 years God's domain had been in operation, only 5 ancient legacy steels had appeared. One could easily imagine the value of those steels. This was also the reason why Feng was so excited to see the ancient legacy steel appear in the hero trial. Take away the information recorded? Aqua Rose was confused by Feng's words. No matter how she looked at the steel, she simply couldn't imagine how he was going to take away the information on it. Currently they couldn't touch the steel at all. And even after using the master-ranked appraisal, she still couldn't extract any information from the steel. Just how were they supposed to take the recorded information? You can't extract the information recorded on the steel using normal methods. Not only is the information recorded massive, but it is also extremely complex. If you wish to extract the recorded information, you have to record the magic arrays carved on the steel, Feng explained. Record the magic arrays on it? Aqua Rose gaped in shock as she looked at the worn steel. There were roughly 40 magic arrays engraved on the crystal steel, and even the simplest one was an advanced magic array. Recording them all was simply a joke. They could spend only 5 days inside the trial space. Meanwhile, it took around half a day to learn one advanced magic array. What more magic arrays above the advanced rank? Relax. This task might be difficult for others, but it isn't particularly difficult for me. All I need is some time, Feng said confidently. During this period, you'll lead the team and continue taking care of the trial monsters. Learning the magic arrays recorded on the ancient legacy steel would indeed be arduous for an advanced magician. However, he had long been an intermediate master magician. 2 or 3 days would be more than enough for him to learn and record these magic arrays. I understand. Aqua Rose nodded before taking charge of the team to continue clearing out the trial monsters in their way. As for Feng, he sat quietly before the ancient legacy steel, confusing Violet Sword's members. However, they did not put too much thought into the matter. After all, the steel belonged to Zero Wing. How Zero Wing dealt with it was up to the guild's discretion. Meanwhile, Feng started analyzing the layers of magic arrays engraved on the steel. Learning a magic array was considerably easier than decoding one. The troublesome part was having to memorize a lot of things. However, Feng's brain capacity now surpassed that of ordinary people. Learning and recording the magic arrays was a piece of cake for him. In less than an hour, Feng had already memorized one advanced magic array and started on the second one. In the meantime, Aqua Rose and the others kept clearing out trial monsters and advancing down the tunnel. However, the deeper into the tunnel they went, the more densely packed the trial monsters became. Eventually, the number of monsters the team faced each time had grown so high that even Zero Wings members started feeling taxed. As a result, the team's speed of advance slowed. Fortunately, fighting inside this trial ground was akin to taking part in an intense training session. Everyone's combat standard increased as they fought the trial monsters. Moreover, the EXP everyone obtained was incredibly generous. In just 2 short days, everyone had gained a little more than a level. Aqua Rose and the other members of Zero Wing had already reached level 119, whereas Violet Swords and Azure's members were now at level 114. Crimson Star and Wildfighter were just 30% away from level 115. The leveling speed here astonished Crimson Star and the others. As everyone's motivation was increasing, a series of system announcements suddenly entered their ears. God's Domain System Announcement. Some players have triggered the new expansion pack, Demon Gods Chaos. God's Domain System Announcement. The new expansion pack, Demon Gods Chaos, will activate in one natural day. At that time, all non-NPC towns and cities will no longer receive the protection of NPC kingdoms and empires. Everyone inside the trial space gasped when they heard the system announcement. On the surface, this new expansion pack might not seem like it would affect players in any way, but everyone present understood that it would usher in a new era in God's domain. Currently, aside from level 100+ maps, all guild towns and cities established in maps below level 100 came under the aegis of NPC kingdoms and empires. If these guild towns and cities suddenly lost this protection, the consequences would be unimaginable. After all, most guild towns and guild cities relied on the NPCs they employed from the various NPC kingdoms and empires to maintain security. Without this layer of security, players could take action inside guild towns and cities much more freely. The chaos that would befall the various guild towns and cities at that time would go without saying. Aside from maintaining security, defending against siege attacks would also become much more difficult. In other words, the activation of the Demon Gods Chaos expansion pack would thoroughly change the structure of God's domain. Without the threat of NPCs, many powers would most likely make a move against their rivals. Outside the ancient secret land, chaos had already ensued. Good. Wonderful. Let's see how those local powers are going to continue protecting their resource spots without those troublesome NPC guards. I don't know who activated this expansion pack, but those people have really given us dark powers a shot in the arm. Now that those NPCs are gone, no one can stop us now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The powers that were secretly developing themselves in the various kingdoms and empires started growing excited and restless. As for the superpowers, they promptly held meetings to draft countermeasures for the expansion pack's activation. Meanwhile, as the entire God's domain was in chaos, Feng slowly stood up from in front of the ancient legacy stele inside the ancient secret land. Finally, success. Feng smiled when he saw the stele before him gradually fading out of existence. He then started drawing the magic arrays he memorized, which released a frightening aura that shook even the surrounding space. Chapter 2637, Astonishing Memory Crystal. The commotion caused by the ancient legacy stele was huge. Even Crimson Star and the others, who were resting over 3,000 yards away, sensed the unusual mana fluctuation from the stele. Did something happen over there? This mana fluctuation rivals what Tier 5 NPCs cause when using Tier 5 spells, Crimson Star exclaimed as she turned toward the mana fluctuation's origin, horror coloring her eyes. Isn't that guild leader Black Flame's current location? Did something happen to him? Wildfighter similarly revealed a serious expression on his face when he felt the intense mana fluctuation. Tier 5 NPCs were existences that stood at the apex of God's domain. The Tier 5 spells used by these NPCs could wreak great devastation. Before such spells, Tier 3 players like themselves wouldn't even be able to put up the slightest bit of resistance. Everyone present would be instantly killed. Meanwhile, all sorts of dangers filled this trial space. The trial monsters weren't the only threat here. There were also plenty of traps and dangerous events that occurred at random. An ambush by a Tier 5 spell was well within the range of possibilities. If something really happened to Feng, then it would deal a huge blow to the entire team. After all, their team revolved around Feng. Even though the experts on the team understood that Aqua Rose was the person leading them all this time, if he disappeared, many of those experts would most likely question her leadership. In this situation, Aqua Rose had to contact Feng immediately. Guild leader, is everything alright on your side? Aqua Rose asked worriedly. Currently, nobody was more anxious than she was about this sudden mana fluctuation. She knew that Feng was under the demon god's curse, which tripled his death penalty. Meanwhile, players inside the trial space could only wait to get automatically resurrected. Hence, if an ordinary player needed 1 day to get automatically resurrected, then Feng would need 3 days. If he died right now, then their odds of clearing the hero trial would become even slimmer. Relax, everything's fine. I just unlocked the information recorded on the steel, Feng said, smiling when he saw the anxious look on Aqua Rose's face. Unlocking the information actually caused such a huge commotion? Aqua Rose was stunned when she heard Feng's words. This was definitely the strongest mana fluctuation she had experienced in God's domain. If this mana fluctuation were due to a spell, she wouldn't be surprised if it destroyed an entire NPC city. However, Feng was telling her that this frightening mana fluctuation was merely a consequence of unlocking the recorded information on the steel. This was simply unbelievable. This is information left behind by an ancient god. It is naturally extraordinary. However, I still need some time to complete the unlocking process. For now, continue clearing the trial monsters on your side. I'll meet up with you once I'm done, Feng explained and chuckled. In reality, the mana fluctuation had surprised even Feng. From what he knew about ancient legacy steels, the strength of the mana fluctuation when the recorded information was unlocked was an indicator of the recorded information's value. Generally, though, the mana fluctuations that occurred extended only 1 or 2,000 yards. Now, however, the mana fluctuation from this ancient legacy steel reached Aqua Rose's location, roughly 3,000 yards away. It rivaled the ancient legacy steel found in the ancient god's tomb, a level 150+ ancient secret land. However, the ancient god's tomb's minimum entry requirement was tier 4. Alright, I'll notify the others, Aqua Rose answered. After giving the matter some thought, she found Feng's words reasonable. Since the information recorded on the steel was something left behind by an ancient god, it naturally wouldn't be something ordinary. She then turned to the rest of the team and said, "Everyone, please rest assured. Nothing has happened to the guild leader." The guild leader said that this mana fluctuation is merely a consequence of him unlocking the information recorded on the steel. He says that he is not in any danger and that we should continue clearing out the remaining trial monsters. He will rejoin us shortly. Aqua Rose's words kindled a sense of admiration toward Feng and everyone in the team. They hadn't thought that Feng would actually be able to obtain something from the steel. After a brief discussion, they promptly resumed clearing out the trial monsters in their path. In the meantime, Feng was staring intently at the gradually forming crystal hovering before him. When extracting information from ancient legacy steels, once players successfully learned the magic arrays recorded on a steel and drew them, the drawn magic arrays would gather mana from the surroundings to create a memory crystal. This was one of the more common methods ancient gods used to pass down their legacies. After all, compared to books, memory crystals were much better at withstanding the ravages of time. So long as the memory crystal was intact, there wouldn't be any need to worry about parts of the information getting lost. 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours. After the magic arrays gathered mana for 15 consecutive hours, a memory crystal the size of 4 adult fists took shape before Feng. This memory crystal was at least triple the size of ordinary memory crystals. Amazing. Just what is recorded in it? Feng gazed at the memory crystal before him in astonishment. The memory crystals that Iliadi had given him already contained a ton of information. If not for his brain capacity being sufficiently high, he would have lost consciousness when accepting all that information. The memory crystal before him, however, was 3 times larger than the ones the Heavenly Blue Saint had given him. The amount of information contained within this unusually large memory crystal was definitely several dozen times more. Feng could not even begin to imagine what kind of information awaited him. After observing the memory crystal for a brief moment, Feng then tapped his finger on it to access its recorded information. He was really eager to find out what it contained. However, as soon as he did so, he was stunned. System. This memory crystal is extremely unstable and can remain in existence for only 2 natural days before disappearing. System, warning. You have discovered a large memory crystal. Because of insufficient concentration, you are unable to read the information completely. If you persist in reading the information, there is a very large chance you will enter a deep coma. Do you still wish to read the information? I can't read it even as a tier 3 player? The system notifications took Feng aback. Just what is recorded inside? This was definitely the first time he had come across such a situation. In fact, he had never heard of something like this happening before. It seems I toiled for nothing. Sure enough, the information recorded on an ancient legacy stele really isn't easy to obtain. Feng smiled bitterly as he looked at the memory crystal in his hands. Having insufficient concentration wasn't a problem that could be solved quickly. Items capable of raising one's concentration were extremely rare in God's domain. The concentration he could receive from raising his levels and improving his equipment was also negligible at best. If he couldn't process the recorded information with the concentration of a Tier 3 player, then he would have to wait until he had completed his Tier 4 promotion. As for forcefully trying to read the recorded information, this was absolutely out of the question. Ostensibly, there was only a very large chance for him to enter a deep coma. In reality, if he did try to read the information, then he was guaranteed to fall into a coma. The time he would lose from being in a coma was one thing. What he truly feared was the irreparable brain damage. If that happened, he would have a much more difficult time with future tier promotions, something he definitely didn't want. Even if the information recorded in this memory crystal was incredibly valuable, he still wouldn't trade his future for it. After all, compared to the information left behind by an ancient god, reaching Tier 5 and Tier 6 was much more important. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You wait. There's another method I can use to read this memory crystal. Just as Feng was about to store the memory crystal, he received a sudden inspiration. Divine Will. If I can polish myself using the Tier 4 Divine Will, I can push my concentration from the peak of Tier 3 to the Tier 4 standard. So long as my concentration reaches the Tier 4 standard, I shouldn't have any problems reading the information recorded in this. The more Feng thought about it, the more he found his plan to be feasible. Anyone else would still have difficulties pushing their concentration to the Tier 4 standard within 2 short days, even if they could train themselves using the Tier 4 Divine Will. However, it was a different story for him. Thanks to his advanced bloodline, his concentration standard had long since reached the peak of Tier 3, just a step shy of the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, he was very familiar with training using the Divine Will. Given one day, he had an excellent chance of pushing his concentration to the Tier 4 standard. No sooner had Feng stored the memory crystal than Aqua Rose called him and announced, "Guild leader, we discovered the trial boss." Chapter 2638, Ancient Lich, Black Dragon Soul. Aqua Rose and the others wore grim expressions on their faces as they looked at a towering, dilapidated altar some distance away in the middle of the tunnel. The reason for their reactions was that the altar's surroundings were filled with trial warriors and trial elites, these monsters numbering around 3,000, in addition to the trial boss. Moreover, the 4 corners of the altar each had a mana tower. Not only did the mana towers suppress all hostile forces within their range, but they also prevented players from using any skills and spells. This is just cheating. Not only are there so many monsters around the boss, but there are actually 4 mana towers as well. With this, let alone a 200-man team, even a 2,000-man team can't do anything. Floating Light cursed despite himself as he looked at the 4 mana towers. Mana towers were strategic-level defensive constructions, and not just any ordinary constructions, but top-tier advanced constructions. They were also things that players on the Western continent were extremely familiar with. After all, every one of the Western continent's NPC cities possessed these defensive constructions. The Mana Tower was also a large part of the reason why the Western continent's NPC cities could develop steadily despite having to face the constant threat of the demonic creature armies. Originally, the trial boss and its underlings already had an absolute advantage. Now these monsters even boasted the protection of 4 Mana Towers. How were players like themselves supposed to clear this trial? Sure enough, it is still too early for us to come here. Crimson Star could not help a bitter smile as she considered the resting Lich sitting atop the altar. Zorok, Ancient Lich, Superior Mythic, Level 122 HP 3, 700, 000/3, 700, 000/000, while Zorok's HP of 3.7 billion wasn't particularly high for an Ancient Lich. This amount was more than enough to instill despair into players. Very few magically oriented monsters existed in God's domain. However, compared to physically oriented monsters of the same level and rank, magically oriented monsters were around 30% to 40% more difficult to handle. This was akin to the difference between physical class NPCs and magical class NPCs. Magical class NPCs were more adept at executing long-range AoE attacks and could wreak much greater destruction than physical class NPCs could. Meanwhile, ancient liches were monsters that possessed magical talents surpassing even that of elves. In the hands of an ancient lich, spells were no different from toys. It could play around with magic however it wanted to. Previously, Violet Sword had come across a level 87, mythic-ranked ancient lich out in the fields. In order to defeat it, the guild had dispatched a 5,000-man legion filled with level 90-plus experts, who had taken turns attacking the boss in teams of 1,000. In the end they had slain the ancient lich, but at the cost of nearly 4,000 experts. Now, not only was the ancient lich before them level 122, but it was even a superior mythic-ranked monster. If they came across this ancient lich in the outside world, they would have most likely turned tail and fled already. To make matters worse, there were thousands of trial monsters and 4 mana towers supporting the ancient lich. With this, even a 10,000-man legion filled with expert players of the same level wouldn't be able to raid it. At this moment, let alone Violet Swords and Azure's members, even Aqua Rose and the other Zero Wing members frowned upon seeing Zorok. After all, the raid difficulty of this trial boss was simply stratospheric. In fact, in their opinion, Zorok was no longer a boss that players could challenge at Tier 3. Only a Tier 4 team would have any hope of raiding it. Guild leader Black Flame, the boss's raid difficulty is too high. Even if we throw all our lives away and use all our trump cards, I'm afraid we still won't be able to pose a threat to the boss. Do you still wish to continue fighting? Wildfighter asked as he turned to Feng, who had just rejoined the team. At the same time though, he could not help but sigh in disappointment. They had gone through great lengths to reach the trial boss. If there were a chance of success, he would want to try raiding the trial boss as well. However, no matter how he looked at the situation, he simply couldn't see any hope whatsoever. After all, if they wished to raid the ancient lich, they would need to destroy the 4 mana towers first. Otherwise, they would be no different from live targets for the ancient lich, unable to put up any resistance at all. However, destroying the 4 mana towers was easier said than done. After all, they would have to go up against the trial boss and several thousand trial monsters when attacking the mana towers. To make matters worse, the mana towers possessed incredibly strong defensive capabilities. Attacks below the Tier 4 standard wouldn't even scratch the towers. However, with the 4 mana towers suppressing all hostile forces within the vicinity, they wouldn't be able to use any skills or spells against the towers. In other words, they would have to use normal attacks against these mana towers while also having weakened basic attributes. In such a situation, how many players on the team could execute attacks reaching the Tier 4 standard? If they had to rely on only a handful of players to destroy the 4 mana towers, it was unlikely that they could destroy even 1 mana tower before they team wiped. Not to mention, the mana towers would also periodically launch large-scale destruction spells. Just one of these spells would be more than enough to annihilate their team. Facing the simultaneous attacks of 4 mana towers was an absolute nightmare. Guild leader Black Flame, if you're reluctant to give up, I can suggest to the guild to alter our agreement to clearing the elite trial instead of the hero trial. Only, the slots you will receive at that time will be significantly reduced. What do you think? Crimson Star suggested. Wildfighter did not show any disagreement with Crimson Star's proposal. The strength Zero Wing had displayed during the trial truly exceeded their imaginations. For Violet Sword, being able to form a partnership with Zero Wing was definitely a good thing. Crimson Star really reacted quickly. Duan Han smiled faintly when he overheard Crimson Star's suggestion. However, he wasn't particularly surprised. Zero Wing's potential was already clear for all to see. If nothing untoward happened, it would definitely grow into a superpower in the future. The guild would be especially powerful due to its ability to nurture players. If Violet Sword's young talents could receive Zero Wing's training as well, Violet Sword might even have a chance to become one of the 5 great super guilds. After seeing Crimson Star's actions, Duan Han also felt the need to have the Azure Chamber of Commerce further deepen its relationship with Zero Wing. However, as soon as Crimson Star finished speaking, Feng shook his head. If the problem is with the slots, I can try to negotiate with the others in the guild. Guild leader Black Flame, Wildfighter said when he saw Feng shaking his head. No, you misunderstand me, Vice Commander Wildfighter. I don't have any problem with your proposal. Only I still wish to challenge the boss. After all, it wasn't easy getting up to this point. It is such a waste to give up without even trying, Feng said. Setting aside the status they would gain in the ancient city after clearing the hero trial, Just the ancient legacy steel's recorded information alone made raiding the trial boss imperative. After all, the chances of coming across an ancient legacy steel in God's domain were abysmally low, not to mention one that required such a large memory crystal. If he could get his hands on the recorded information, it would most likely be the greatest harvest from this hero trial. Hence, he naturally couldn't give up without a fight. But those mana towers? Crimson Star countered worriedly when she saw that Feng still wished to attempt the raid. What if we can destroy those mana towers within a short time? Feng asked after giving the matter some thought. Destroy those towers within a short time? Feng's words threw Crimson Star for a loop. Skeptical, she asked, is that possible? The odds are roughly even, Feng said after making some mental calculations. Upon hearing Feng's words, everyone present stared at him in astonishment. For a moment they thought that Feng was joking with them. These were 4 mana towers they were talking about. Destroying one without using any skills or spells would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. How could they destroy all 4 of them within a short time? If you really have an even chance of success, then we can give your plan a try, Crimson Star said as she turned to study the distant altar. Wildfighter nodded in agreement. The most troublesome part about this entire raid was the 4 mana towers. If it was possible to destroy the 4 mana towers quickly, then an attempt was indeed justified. Since everyone agrees, that makes things simple, Feng said, smiling when he saw that Crimson Star and Wildfighter were willing to try raiding the trial boss. Afterward, I'll personally destroy the 4 mana towers. During this period, I hope that you can keep the trial monsters busy. You'll destroy the 4 mana towers yourself? Crimson Star gaped at Feng in disbelief. Although Feng's attacks indeed carried power at the Tier 4 standard, the amount of time it would take him to destroy the mana towers on his own was no laughing matter. That's right. I'll destroy them, Feng replied seriously while nodding. Alright then. Since you wish to try, then let's try it, Guild Leader Black Flame. Crimson Star sighed helplessly when she saw that he was serious. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At this point, she no longer held any hope of him succeeding. However, she didn't mind letting the Violet Sword members present die once to consolidate Violet Sword's partnership with Zero Wing. After all, aside from the long resurrection time, the death penalty players suffered in the ancient secret land was very low. Following which, everyone present readied themselves for battle and positioned themselves right outside the mana tower's suppression radius. Once they were given the command, they would immediately charge into the battlefield and attract the trial monster's attention. Guild Leader Black Flame, everything's ready? You may start anytime. Crimson Star reported to Feng after seeing that everyone was in position. Good. I'll start now. After saying so, Feng unsheathed the Abyssal Blade and activated Black Dragon's Soul. Chapter 2639, Black Dragon King's Might. When Feng unsheathed the Abyssal Blade and activated Black Dragon's Soul, the Abyssal Blade immediately transformed into a cloud of black mist, which then enveloped Feng completely before expanding to cover a 60-yard radius around him. Before anyone could react to this strange development, a deafening dragon roar came from the cloud. In the next moment, a 30-meter-tall black dragon leaped out of the black mist, releasing a powerful aura that washed over the crowd. A dragon? Crimson Star and Wildfighter could not help doubting their eyes when they saw the incredibly realistic black dragon before them. The dragon race was one of the apex races in God's domain. Dragons were also a symbol of strength and destruction. Whenever one appeared on the continent of God's domain, turmoil would follow. Now, however, Feng had actually transformed himself into a dragon. Moreover, in terms of appearance or life rating, he was exactly the same as a true dragon. The only unfortunate matter was that the dragon that Feng had transformed into was only Tier 3. Even so, this was still an astounding ability. After all, a dragon's attributes were far superior to those of existences of the same tier. However, while the Violet Sword and Azure members were astonished by this matter, they were, after all, core experts of their respective guilds and quickly snapped out of their daze. Upon receiving Aqua Rose's command, they promptly charged toward the altar, together with Zero Wing's members. As soon as everyone entered the range of the mana towers, the altar's trial monsters detected them. Before they could even get within 300 yards of the altar, the trial monsters had already moved into position, with 500 trial monsters standing resolutely at the bottom of the altar's staircase. The remaining trial monsters positioned themselves on the various steps of the staircase and readied their bows. So long as the intruding players were within their attack range, they would immediately loose their arrows. The 4 mana towers surrounding the altar also started launching magic beams at the team. Immediately, 4 light pillars emerged within the trial tunnel and vaporized everything within range. Fortunately, all the members on the team had spread out. In addition, the mana tower's cannons did not possess a very large AoE. As a result, aside from some unlucky players that had bad positioning, everyone else managed to slip out of the beam attack's AoE in time. Even so, the team had still lost over a dozen players just from that first round of attacks. Upon seeing this, the surviving members of the team gulped nervously, grim expressions settling on their faces. They hadn't even started fighting, yet they had already lost over a dozen members. At this rate, they would most likely get annihilated before they could even kill a trial monster. However, just as a heavy atmosphere descended on the team, a black figure suddenly flew overhead and arrived within 100 yards of a mana tower in the blink of an eye. Seeing this figure, everyone relaxed slightly and breathed out a sigh of relief. Only when Feng arrived within 100 yards of the first mana tower, the ancient Lich seated at the top of the altar suddenly opened its eyes, the blood-red glow in its hollow eye sockets locking on to him immediately. The Lich then extended its hand at the black dragon and started chanting an incantation. Less than a second later, a twofold magic array appeared beneath the Lich's feet. Speed casting? Crimson Star's complexion darkened when she saw Zorak's spell casting. Zorak originally already possessed incredibly high HP for an ancient Lich. Now it was even capable of executing speed casting. Moreover, its speed casting was exceptionally fast. A Tier 4 spell, which usually required 4 or 5 seconds to cast, got completed in less than a second. The Lich's casting speed was simply unbelievable. The instant the twofold magic array took shape, several hundred ice blades formed around Zorak. The ice blades then tore space as they shot straight at Feng. Tier 4 spell Frost Dance. Not only did every one of these ice blades carry power surpassing that of Tier 4 mythic monsters, but they also froze their surroundings completely. As the several hundred ice blades flew toward Feng, they transformed their surroundings into a world of frost. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but grow anxious. Dodging Zorak's attack was virtually impossible. If Feng got stuck dealing with the ancient Lich's attacks, then he wouldn't even be able to close in on the mana towers. Just when the several hundred ice blades were about to devour Feng, he suddenly extended a claw and swiped at the empty space before him. The phantom of a gigantic claw instantly appeared in midair. Holy Annihilation Mana Technique Light Shadow. In the next moment, the gigantic claw tore through the frozen world and transformed the space before Feng into a pitch-black void. The several hundred ice blades disappeared completely as if they had never appeared to begin with. He blocked it. So, this is Guild Leader Black Flame's true strength? Everyone present was stupefied when they saw the pitch-black void that had formed before the black dragon. Those were several hundred ice blades. Every one of those ice blades carried power surpassing that of ordinary mythic monsters. Going up against the ancient Lich's attack would be akin to going up against the simultaneous attacks of several hundred mythic monsters. Yet Feng had actually nullified all those ice blades with just a single blow. However, before everyone could snap out of their daze, Feng flapped his wings and arrived before the nearest mana tower. He then sent a claw smashing into the 60-meter-tall tower. Boom. Along with a thundering explosion, the magic barrier protecting the mana tower shattered. The mana tower itself had also started trembling violently, its original durability of 5,000 instantly decreasing by over 200 points. Crimson Star and the others, who were still charging toward the altar, nearly had their eyes fall out of their sockets when they saw this. The mana tower's defensive capability was at the Tier 4 standard. In other words, non-Tier 4 attacks wouldn't harm the mana tower at all. Even if a Tier 3 attack managed to cause damage, it would at most reduce the tower's durability by the standard 20 points. Now, however, Feng had reduced the mana tower's durability by over 200 points with just one attack. The power he demonstrated was simply astonishing. At this moment, let alone Crimson Star and the others, even Feng himself was surprised by this situation. Transforming into a Black Dragon King actually elevated my strength to such an extent? When Feng saw that the torn space before him was not showing any signs of recovery, he determined that the power of his attack had indeed reached the advanced Tier 4 standard. Before he had transformed into a Black Dragon King, his basic attributes allowed him to exhibit power at only the basic Tier 4 standard. However, in God's domain, further elevating one's power after reaching the Tier 4 standard was incredibly difficult. Only by being capable of exhibiting power at the advanced Tier 4 standard would one be able to just barely reach the standard of superior mythics. In other words, even without using any techniques, he could currently contend against the weakest of superior mythics. Despite this astonishing discovery, Feng quickly recovered his senses and resumed attacking the mana tower before him. -224. -219. -222. As Feng's claws landed on the mana tower one after another, the tower's durability rapidly decreased. In no time at all, the mana tower had already lost 1/5 of its total durability, the speed of its deterioration making Crimson Star and the others' blood boil. At this time, though, both the mana towers and the ancient Lich launched counterattacks at Feng. Immediately, the 4 mana towers fired their magic cannons at Feng, while the ancient Lich used its domain and over a dozen magic blades to restrict and attack him. Every one of the attacks sent at Feng carried the power of a superior mythic. Not daring to be careless, Feng continued using Light Shadow to defend himself before resuming his bombardment of the mana tower before him. However, Light Shadow placed an enormous burden on Feng's concentration. Even after he transformed into a Black Dragon King and gained a much superior physique, the amount of concentration he consumed when executing Light Shadow hardly decreased. By the time Feng had destroyed the second mana tower, he no longer dared to use Light Shadow to defend against the mana towers and ancient Lich's attacks, opting to use Sword's Orbit instead. However, the boost in power Sword's Orbit provided was inferior to that from Light Shadow. As a result, Feng continuously lost HP as he defended himself. Approaching and attacking the mana towers also became much more difficult. By the time Feng destroyed the third mana tower, his HP had already fallen to 64%. At this point, Zorok's attacks became even more frenzied. And when Feng started attacking the fourth mana tower, the ancient Lich also started double speed casting and dishing out Tier 4 spells like they were nothing. When Feng's HP fell to 24%, the fourth and last mana tower's durability zeroed out. At the same time, the suppression on the space surrounding the altar disappeared, and everyone was free to use skills and spells again. Zorok grew thoroughly enraged upon seeing the fourth mana tower's destruction. Damnable dragon! Zorok bellowed as it glared at Feng. The world around Feng immediately dimmed as a gigantic, threefold magic array appeared above his head. A Tier 4 curse? Feng's complexion darkened when he saw the threefold magic array. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU as he stared at it in shock, flames of annihilation suddenly descended from the threefold magic array, covering a 500-yard radius and enveloping the entire altar. Tier 4 curse, Annihilation Lotus. The faces of Crimson Star and the others sank at this sight. Shatter. Not daring to hold back, Feng immediately widened his mouth and used his strongest move, Dragon Breath. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.